Heart of the World by H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 7. The Hacienda. Returning to the place where we had eaten, we found the alcalde talking with the sailors as to their plans. On seeing us, the boatswain advanced and said that, if it was our pleasure, he and his companions proposed to rest for a few days at the neighbouring rancho. Then they would row the boat along the coast to Campeche, which they hoped in favourable weather to reach in 60 hours. He added that he trusted we would accompany them. I answered that we wished for no more of the sea at present, and that we intended to pursue our journey to the town of Potrerillo, where we would refit before undertaking an expedition to the ruined cities of Yucatan. The boatswain said it was well, though he was sorry that they could not escort us so far, as it was their duty to report the loss of the ship to its owner, who lived in Campeche. When we heard this, the señor unbuckled the belt of money which he wore about his waist, and pouring out half a handful of gold pieces, he begged the boatswain to accept of them for a division between himself and his companions. All this while Don José was sitting close to us, watching everything that passed, and I saw his eyes brighten at the sight of the belt of gold. "You are fortunate to have saved so much," he said, speaking for the first time. "All that I had has gone down with the ship. Yes, $3,000 or more." "You should have followed our example," answered the señor. "We divided our cash between the three of us, and secured it upon our persons, though perhaps you were wise after all, since such a weight of gold might have been awkward if, like you, we had been called upon to swim. By the way, señor, what are your plans?" "If you will allow me," answered the Mexican, "I will walk with you towards Potrerillo, for my home lies on that road. Would you be offended, señor, if on behalf of my father I ventured to offer his hospitality to you and your companions?" "To speak plainly, Don José," said the señor, "our past experience has not been such as to cause us to desire to have anything more to do with you. May I remind you, putting aside other matters, that last night you attempted to stab me?" "Señor," answered the man, with every sign of contrition, "if I did this it was because terror and madness possessed me, and most humbly do I beg your pardon for the deed, and for any angry and foolish words that I may have spoken before it. Señor, you saved my life, and my heart is filled with gratitude towards you who have thus repaid evil with good. I know that you have heard an ill report of my father, and, to speak truth, at times when the liquor is in him, he is a bad and violent old man. Yet he has this virtue, that he loves me, his son, and all those who are kind to me. Therefore, in his name and my own, I pray that you will forget the past and accept of our hospitality for some few days, or at least until you have recovered from your fatigue, and we can furnish you with arms and horses to help you forward on your journey." "Certainly we desire to buy mules and guns," answered the señor. "If you think that your father will be able to supply these, we will avail ourselves of your kindness and pass a night or two at his hacienda." "Señor, the place is yours, and all that it contains," Don José answered with much courtesy, but as he spoke I saw his eyes gleam with an evil fire. "Doubtless," I interrupted, "for I understand that Don Pedro Moreno is famed for his hospitality. Still, in accepting it, I venture to ask for a promise of safe conduct, more especially as, save for our pistols and knives, we are unarmed." "Do you wish to insult me, señor?" Don José asked angrily. "Not in the least, señor, but I find it a little strange that you, who 2 nights ago refused to sit at meat with a dog of an Indian, should now be anxious to receive that same dog in your home." "Have I not said that I am sorry for what is past?" he answered. "And can a man do more? Gentlemen, if any evil is attempted towards you in my father's house, I will answer for it with my life." "That is quite sufficient," broke in the señor, "especially as in such an event we should most certainly hold you to your bond. Now tell me, how far is the /hacienda/ from this spot?" "Well, if we start at once, we should reach it at sundown," he answered. "That is, on foot, though it is but 3 hours' ride from the house to the mouth of the river." "Then let us go," he said, and 10 minutes later we were on the road. Before we went, however, we bade a warm farewell to the sailors, and also to the /alcalde/ of the village, all of whom were somewhat disturbed on learning that we proposed to sleep at Santa Cruz. "The place has an evil name," said the /alcalde, "and it is a house of thieves and smugglers. Only last week a cargo that never paid duty went up the river. They say that Don Pedro was fathered by the devil in person. Oh, may the saints protect you from him, Lord." "We have business that takes us to this house, friend," I answered, "but doubtless it will be easy for you to keep yourself informed of what chances in that neighbourhood. If we should not appear again within a few days, perhaps it may please you to advise the authorities at Campeche that we are missing." "The authorities are afraid of Don Pedro," answered the /alcalde, shaking his head. "Also, he bribes them so heavily that they grow blind when they look his way. Still, I will do the best I can, be sure of that, and as an /Inglés/ is with you, it is possible that I may be able to get help if necessary." Our walk that day was long and hot, though we had nothing to carry except the clothes on our backs, all our possessions having been lost in the ship. At noon we halted, and, the heat being great, ate some food that we had brought with us, and slept 2 hours in the shade, which sleep was most grateful, for we were weary. Then we rose and tramped on, till at length we came within sight of this /hacienda/, where, though I little guessed it at the time, I was fated to spend so many years of my life. Walking through a large milpa, or cornfield, that in front of the building, which is now planted with coffee bushes, we reached the gateway and entered the courtyard, where we were met by many fierce dogs, which rushed upon us from all sides. Don José beat back the dogs that knew him, and, leaving us under the charge of some half-breeds, he entered the house. After a while he returned again and led us through the passages into the dining hall, which, as you know, is the largest room in the /hacienda/, and in former days served as the refectory of the monks. Several lamps were hung upon its wall, for already it grew dark, and by their light we saw 5 or 6 people gathered round a long table, waiting for supper, which was being laid by Indian girls. Of these men it is sufficient to say that they were of mixed race and villainous appearance. Turning from them, we looked towards the far end of the chamber, where a hammock was slung from the beams in the roof, in which lay a man whom a handsome girl, also an Indian, was employed in rocking to and fro. "Come and be introduced to my father, who expects you," said Don José, leading the way towards the hammock. "Father, here is that brave Englishman who saved my life last night, and with him the Indian gentleman who did not wish to save my life. As I told you, I have offered them hospitality on your behalf, feeling sure that they would be welcome here." At the sound of his son's voice, Don Pedro awoke, or pretended to be awake, from his doze, and bade the girl cease swinging the hammock. Then he sat up and looked at us. He was a short, stout man of about 60 years of age, so short indeed that although the hammock was slung low, his legs did not touch the floor. Notwithstanding this lack of stature, Don Pedro's appearance was striking, with his long, carefully brushed white hair gave him a venerable aspect. Other beauties he had none, however, for his cheeks were flabby and wrinkled, his mouth was cruel and sensuous, and his dull eyes, which were small, half open, and protected from the glare of the lamps by spectacles of tinted glass, can best be described as horrible, like those of a snake. Looking at him, we could well believe that his reputation was not exaggerated, for he bore the stamp of evil on his face. Still he bowed with much courtesy, and addressed the señor in Spanish. "So you are the Englishman who saved my son here from the sinking ship," he said in a slow, powerful voice, peering at us with his fish-like eyes from beneath the coloured glasses. "He tells me that you rowed back to the tide of the foundering vessel merely in order to fetch him. Well, it was a brave deed, and one that I should not have dared myself, for I have always found it hard enough to keep my own breath in me without attempting to preserve that of other people. But, as I have seen several times, you Englishmen are peculiar in these matters, foolhardy indeed. Señor, I am grateful to you, and this house and all within it is at your disposal, and that of your companions," and he glanced with genuine affection at the coarse, beetle-browed man beside him, who was gnawing one end of his moustache and staring at us out of the corner of his eyes. "Tell me," he added, "to what do I owe the honour of your presence?" "To an accident, Don Pedro," the señor answered. "As it chances, the ruins of this ancient land interest me much, and I was travelling to Palenque with my Indian friend, Don Ignacio, when we were so unfortunate as to be wrecked near your hospitable house. In our dilemma we accepted the invitation of your son to visit you, in the hope that you may be able to sell us some guns and mules." "Ruins, Señor Strickland? Decidedly you Englishmen are strange. What pleasure can you find in hunting about among old walls built by men long dead, unless indeed you seek for treasure there? For my part, I hate the name of ruins, for I have always suffered from a presentiment that I shall meet my end among them, and that is bad to think. Bah!" He spat upon the floor. "There it comes upon me again suddenly as a fit of ague. Well," he went on, "you are lucky to have saved your lives and your money, and to-morrow we will see about the things that you desire to buy. Meanwhile, you are travel-stained, and doubtless will wish to cleanse yourselves before you eat. José, conduct the señor and his Indian friend, since he is so fond of his company, to their room, the abbot's chamber. Supper will be served shortly. Till then, adios. Girl, go with them," he added, addressing the woman who had been engaged in swinging the hammock. "Water may be wanted and other things." The woman bowed and went away, and at the door we found her standing, lamp in hand, to light us down the passage. "Now, Señor Jones, you, from whom I write my history, have so often slept in the abbot's chamber in this house that it is needless for me to stop to describe it. Except for the furniture, the room is just as it was in those days. Then it was empty, save for a few chairs, a rough washing stand, and two truckle bedsteads of American make, which were placed at a little distance from each other on either side of the picture of the abbot. "I fear that you will think this is a poor place after the luxury of Mexico, gentlemen," said Don José, "but it is our guest chamber, the best that we have." "Thank you," answered the señor. "It will do very well, though perhaps your visitors suffer sometimes from nightmares," and he glanced at the awful and life-size picture on the south wall of an Indian being burnt at an auto da fe, while devils hanging above his head dragged the soul from his tortured and expiring body. "Pretty, are they not?" said Don José. "I would have them whitewashed over, but my father likes them. You see, all the victims are Indians. There isn't a white man among them, and the old man never could bear Indians. Well, when you are ready, you will come to supper. You will not lose the way, for you can follow the smell of the food," and he left the room. "One moment," I said, addressing the girl who was about to accompany him. "Perhaps you will see that our servant," and I pointed to Molas, "has some meat brought to him here, since your masters will not wish him to sit at table." "See," answered the girl, whose name was Luisa, searching my face with her eyes. By this time Don José was through the door, which the draught pushed to behind him. I watched it close. Then a thought struck me, for I remembered that among our order there are women associates of the outer circle, and I whispered some words in Luisa's ear and made a sign with my hands. She started and gave the ancient answer which is taught even to children, whereto I replied with another sign, that of the presence of the heart. "Where?" she asked, glancing at each of us in turn. "Here," I answered, and drawing out the symbol I held it before her eyes. She saw and made obeisance, and at that moment we heard Don José calling her from the farther side of the door. "I come," she cried in answer, then added in a whisper, "Lord, you are in danger in this house. I cannot tell you now, but if possible I will return. The wine is safe, but drink no coffee, and do not sleep when you lie down. Search the floor and you will understand the reason. I come, señor, I come." And she fled from the room. So soon as the girl was gone, the Señor James went to the door and locked it. Then he returned and said, "What does this all mean, Ignatio?" I did not answer, but pushing aside one of the beds, I searched the floor beneath it. It was discoloured in several places. Next I pulled the blankets off the beds and examined the webbing that formed the mattresses, to discover that this also was stained, though slightly, for it had been washed. Then I said, "Men have died in these beds, señor, and yonder stains were made by their blood. It would seem that the guests of Don Pedro sleep well. First they are drugged and then they are murdered, and it is for this purpose that we have been lured to this house." "Well, we expected nothing else." "That is a pleasing prospect," he answered. "We are this man's guests, surely therefore he will not," and he drew his hands across his throat. "Certainly he will, señor, and it is to this end that we have been brought here by Don José. If others have been murdered, it is not likely that we shall escape, since Don Pedro will be sure that an Inglés would not travel without a large sum of money. Moreover, we have a quarrel with the son, and know too much about the father." "Again I say that the prospect is a pleasant one," answered the señor. "On the whole, it would have been better to be drowned than to live on to be butchered by those villains in this awful place. What an end!" "Do not despair," I answered. We are warned in time, and therefore, I think, shall escape by the help of that girl and the other Indians in the place, since in an hour every one of them will have learned who we are, and be prepared to venture their lives to save us. Also, we came for a purpose, knowing our risk. Now let us make ready and go among these men with a bold face. For of this you may be sure, that nothing will be attempted till late at night, when they think us sleeping. Have you understood, Molas?" "Yes," answered the Indian. "Then watch here or in the outer room till we return, and should the girl come, learn all you can from her as to the whereabouts of the old doctor and his daughter, and other matters. For when she knows that you be of the order, she will speak. Have you been recognized by anyone?" "I think not, señor. When we entered it was too dark for them to see." "Good. Then keep out of their way if possible. Do the best you can with the girl, and take note of all that passes. Farewell." When we reached the dining hall, 9 of the company were already seated at the table, impatient for their food, but Don Pedro was still sitting in his hammock, engaged in earnest conversation with his son José. Of those at the table, but one was a white man, a lanky, withered-looking person with a broken nose, whose general appearance filled us with disgust. The rest were half-breeds, the refuse of revolutions, villains who had escaped the hand of justice, and who lived by robbery and murder. Looking at these outcasts, it became clear to us that if we once fell into their power, we could expect little mercy at their hands, for they would think no more of butchering us in cold blood than does a sportsman of shooting a deer. When Don Pedro perceived us, he slid from the hammock to the ground, and, taking the señor by the hand, he said, "Let me introduce you to my overseer, the Señor Smith, from Texas. He is an American, and will be glad to meet one who can speak English, for notwithstanding much practice, his Spanish is none of the best." The señor bowed, and the American desperado spoke to him in English, wearing a grin on his face like that of a wicked dog as he did so, though I do not know what he said. Then Don Pedro conducted his guest to a place of honour at the head of the table, that beside his own seat, while I was led to another table at a little distance, where my meat was served me alone, since as an Indian of pure blood I was not thought fit for the company of these cross-bred curs. Don José having taken his place at the further end of the board with the /Americano, the meal began, and an excellent one it was. Now, in the conversation that ensued I took no part, except when members of the gang called me to drink wine with them, for they desired to make me drunk. But while I pretended to be occupied with my meat, I thought much and watched more. The talk that passed I set down as I overheard it, and as it was reported to me by the señor. "Try some more of this Burgundy," said Don Pedro, when the dishes had been removed, filling his tumbler for the 7th or 8th time. "It is the right stuff, straight from France, though it never paid duty," and he winked his leaden eye. "Your health, señor, and may you live to do many such brave deeds as that of yesterday, when you saved my son from the sea. By the way, do you know that on board the Santa Maria they said that you had the evil eye, and brought her to wreck? Yes, and your long-faced companion, the Indian also?" "Indeed, I never heard of it before," answered the señor with a laugh, "but it is so. Our evil eyes shall not trouble you for long, as we propose to continue our journey to morrow." "Nonsense, friend, nonsense. You don't suppose that I believe in that sort of rubbish, do you? We may say many things that we do not believe, just for a joke. Thus," and he raised his voice so that I could hear him at my table, "your companion there, is he not named Ignatio? told a story to my disadvantage on board the ship, which I am sure that he did not believe." And suddenly he stared at me and added insolently, "Is it not so, Indian?" "If you seek my opinion, Don Pedro," I answered, leaning forward and speaking very clearly, "I say that it is unprofitable to repeat words that are said, or to remember deeds that are done with. If I spoke certain words, or if in the past you did certain deeds, here beneath your hospitable roof is not the place to recall them." "Quite so, Indian, quite so. You talk like an oracle, as Montezuma used to talk to Cortez, till the conqueror found a way to teach him plain speaking. A great man, Cortez. He understood how to deal with Indians." Then he spat upon the floor, and having looked down the table, spoke to the señor in a somewhat anxious voice. "Tell me," he said, "for your sight is better than mine, how many are there present here tonight?" "Counting my friend, 13, he answered. "I thought so," said our host with an oath, "and it is too late to mend matters now. Well, may the saints, and they should be thick about a monastery, avert the omen. I see you think me a fool." "Not at all," he replied. "I'm rather superstitious myself, and dislike sitting down 13 to a table." So do I, Señor Strickland. Listen, last time we dined 13 in this room, there were 2 travellers here, Americanos, friends of Don Smith, who were trying to open up a trade in these parts. They drank more than was good for them, and the end of it was that in the night they quarrelled and killed each other, yonder in the abbot's chamber where you were sleeping. Poor man, poor man. There was trouble about the matter at the time, but Don Smith explained to his countrymen, and it came to nothing." "Indeed," answered the señor. "It was strange that 2 drunken men should kill each other." "So I say, señor. In truth, for a while I thought that Indians must have got into their rooms and murdered them, but it was proved beyond a doubt that this was not so. Ah, they are a wicked people, the Indians. I have seen much of them, and I should know. Now, the government wishes to treat them too well. Our fathers knew better how to deal with them, but luckily the arm of the government scarcely reaches. No whining padres or officials come prying about my house, though once we had some soldiers," and he cursed at the recollection and drank another glass of Burgundy. "I tell you that they are a wicked people," he went on. "The demonios their fathers worshipped still possess them. Also, they are secret and dangerous. They are Indians now who know where the vast treasures are buried, but they will tell nothing. Yes," and suddenly growing excited under the influence of the strong drink, he leaned over and whispered into his guest's ear, "I have one such in the house at this moment, an old Laconde, that is, an unbaptized Indian. Not that I think him any the worse for that, and with him his daughter, a woman more beautiful than the night. Perhaps if I go on liking you Englishmen, I will show her to you tomorrow. Only then I should have to keep you, for you would never go away. Beautiful, yes, she is beautiful, though a devil at heart. I have not dared to let these little ones see her," and he winked and nodded toward the villains at the table. "But José is to pay her and her papa a visit tonight, and he won't mind her tempers, though they frighten me. Well, Would you believe it, this girl and her old father have the secret of enough treasures to make every man of us here rich as the Queen of England. How do I know that? I know it because I heard it from their own lips. But fill your glass and take a cigar, and I will tell you the story. End of chapter 7. H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 8. The Supper and After. Listen, Señor, if you are interested in old ruins and the Indians. You must have heard tales of races living away in the forest country, where no white man has set his foot, and of their wonderful cities that are said to be full of gold. Many say that these tales are lies, that no such people and no such cities exist. They say this because nobody has found them. But I, for my part, have always believed there was something in the story, seeing that otherwise it would not have lasted so long. Well, a few months back, I heard that a strange old Indian doctor, who was said to have travelled from the far interior, was dwelling somewhere in the forest, together with a woman. But where he dwelt exactly I could not learn, nor indeed did I trouble myself to do so. About 8 weeks ago, however, it happened that an Indian, being asked for a toll, which I charge all passers-by to recoup me for my expense in making roads, señor, paid it with a little lump of pure gold, having a heart stamped on either side of the metal. Now, you may not know, though I do, that the heart is a sacred symbol among these Indians, and has been for many generations, for it is to be seen cut upon the walls of their ruins, though what it means only Satan, their master, can tell. Therefore, when I saw the lump of gold with the token on it, I asked the Indian whence he had it, and he told me readily enough that it came from this old doctor, who gave it to him in payment for some food. He told me also where I might find him, and went upon his way. But his heart being full of deceit, he lied as to the place, so that I searched in vain. Well, to shorten a long story, although to this hour I do not know where the Indian was hiding, I set a trap for him and caught him, aye, and his daughter too. It was a simple one. A man in my pay knew another man who visited the doctor in the forest to get medicine from him, but who would not reveal his hiding place. Still, my servant drew it out of him thus. He sent piteous messages through his friend, begging the doctor to come and save the life of his dying child, which lay in a house near here and could not be moved. The end of it was that the doctor came, and his daughter with him. Yes, they walked at night straight to the snare, into this very house, señor, and only discovered their mistake when they found the door locked upon them, and that the dying child was none other than your humble servant, Don Pedro Moreno. I can tell you, señor, that I laughed till I nearly cried at the sight of their faces when they found out the trick, though there was nothing to laugh at in them, for the man looking like an old king, and the girl like a queen, quite different from the Indians in these parts. Moreover, they wore 2 such serapes as I have never seen, made of green feathers fastened to a foundation of linen. When the old man found himself caged, he asked what it meant and where he was, speaking in a dialect so like the Maya tongue that I could understand him quite well. I told him that he was to be my guest for a while, and with the help of 2 men who were with me, I proceeded to secure him and his daughter in a safe place, whereat he flew into a fearful rage and cursed all of us most dreadfully, and more especially that man who had betrayed him. So awful were his curses and the vengeance that he conjured upon us from heaven, that my hair stood straight upon my head. And as for the man who lured him here under pretence of visiting his child, it came about that within 2 days he died of a sudden sickness, bred of his own fears. When the second man heard of his companion's death, he in turn fled from the place, dreading lest a like fate should overtake him, and has been heard of no more. Thus it comes about, señor, that I alone know where these birds are caged, though I hope to introduce my son to them tonight, for I dare not trust the others, and wish to keep them in the family, nor will I let any Indians near them. Well, when they had calmed down a little, I spoke to my prisoners through a grating, telling them that I wished to know whence they had obtained those lumps of gold stamped with a heart, to which the old man answered that he had no knowledge of any such gold. Now, I was sure that he lied, and took refuge in another trick. The cell where they were shut up is that in which the old monks imprisoned such as were suspected of heresy, and others, and close to it is a secret place. There are many such in this house, señor, where a spy may be hid, and both see and hear all that passes in the cell. In this place I ensconced myself, and lay there for hours, with the rats running over me, so anxious was I to get at the truth. In the end, I was not disappointed, for they began to talk. A great deal of their conversation I could make nothing of, but at length the girl said, after examining an old gilt crucifix that hung upon the wall, "Look, father, here also they have gold." "It is gilt, not gold," he answered. "I know the art of it, though with us it is not practised except to keep from corruption the spears and arrowheads that fowlers use upon the lake." Then he added, "I wonder what that leaden-eyed, greedy-faced white thief would say if he knew that in a single temple we could show him enough of the metal he covets to fill this place 5 times over from floor to ceiling." "Hush," she said, "ears may be listening even in these walls. Let us risk nothing, seeing that by seeming to be ignorant alone we can hope to escape." "Well," asked the señor eagerly, and what did Zibalbay answer? I think you said the old man's name was Zibalbay," he added, trying to recover the slip. "Zibalbay? No, I never mentioned that name," Don Pedro replied suspiciously, and with a sudden change of manner. "He answered nothing at all. Next morning, when I came down to question them, the birds had flown. It is a pity, for otherwise I might have asked the old man if his name is Zibalbay. I suppose that the Indians had let them out, but I could not discover." "Why, Don Pedro, you said just now that they were still in your house." "Did I? Then I made a mistake, as you did about the name. This wine is strong. It must have gone to my head. Sometimes it does, a weakness, and a bad one. It is an old tale, but there it ended, so far as I am concerned. Come, señor, take a cup of coffee. It is good." "Thank you, no," answered the señor. "I never drink coffee at night. It keeps me awake." "Still, I beg you to try ours, friend. We grow it ourselves, and are proud of its flavour." "Oh, it is poison to me. I dare not," he said. "But Pray tell me, do the gentlemen whom I have the honour to see at table cultivate your plantations?" Yes, they cultivate the coffee and the cocoa, and other things also when they have a mind. I dare say you think them a rough-looking lot, but they are kind-hearted. Ah, so kind-hearted. Feeble as I am, they treat me like a father. Bah, señor, what is the good of hiding the truth from one of your discernment? We do business of all sorts here, but the staple of it is smuggling rather than agriculture. The trade is not what it was. Those sharks of customs officers down on the coast there want so much to hold their tongues. But still there are a few pickings. In the old times, when they did not ask questions, it was otherwise, for then men of pluck were ready for anything, from revolution down to the stringing up of a coachload of fat merchants. But now is the day of small profits, and we must be thankful for whatever trifles Providence sends us. "Such as the two Americans who got drunk and killed each other?" suggested the señor, whose tongue was never of the most cautious. Instantly Don Pedro's face changed. The sham geniality born of drink went out of it, and was replaced by a hard and cunning look. "I am tired, señor," he said, "and you must be also, and if you will excuse me, I will light another cigar and take a nap in my hammock. Perhaps you will amuse yourself with the others, señor, till you wish to go to rest." Then rising, he bowed and walked somewhat unsteadily to the far end of the room. When Don Pedro had retired to his hammock, whither the Indian girl Luisa was summoned to swing him to sleep, I saw his son José and the Texan outcast Smith, both of whom, like the rest of the company, were more or less drunk, come to the other señor and ask him to join in a game of cards. Guessing that their object was to make him show what cash he had about him, he also affected to be in liquor, and replied noisily that he had lost most of his money in the shipwreck, and was, moreover, too full of wine to play. "Then you must have lost it on the road, friend," said Don José, "for you forget that you made those sailors a present from a belt of gold which you wore about your middle. However, no gentleman shall be forced to gamble in this house, so come and talk while the others have their little game." "Yes, that will be better," answered the señor, and he staggered to an empty chair placed not far from the table at which I remained, and was served with spirits and cigars. Here he sat watching the play, which was high, although the counters looked innocent enough. They were cocoa beans, and listened to the conversation of the gamblers, in which he joined from time to time. The talk was not good to hear, for as these wretches grew more drunken, they began to boast of their past exploits in various parts of the country. One man told how he had kidnapped and tortured an Indian who had offended him, another how he had murdered a woman of whom he was jealous, and a third of the successful robbing of a coachload of travellers, and their subsequent butchery by the driving of the coach over the edge of a precipice. All these stories, however, were as milk to brandy compared to those that Don Smith, the Americano, growing confidential in his cups, poured forth one after the other, till the señor, unable to bear them any longer, affected to sink into a tipsy doze. All this while I had sat at the little table where my dinner had been served, saying nothing, for none spoke to me, but within hearing of everything that passed. There I sat quiet, my arms folded on my breast, listening attentively to the tales of outrage, wrong, and murder practised by these wicked ones upon my countrymen. To them I was only a member of a despised and hated race. admitted to their company on sufferance in order that I might be robbed and murdered in due course. Yet in my heart I looked on them with loathing and contempt, and felt far above them as the stars, while I watched and wondered how long the great God would suffer his work to be outraged by their presence. Some such thoughts seemed to strike others of that company, for presently Don Smith called out, "Look at that Indian rascal, friend. He is proud as a turkey cock in springtime. Why, he reminds me of the figure of the king in that ruin where we laid up last year, waiting for the señora and her party. You remember the señora, don't you, José? I can hear her squeaks now." He laughed brutally and added, "Come, king, have a drink." "Gracias, señor," I answered, "I have drunk." "Then smoke a cigar, O king." "Gracias, señor, I do not smoke tonight." "My lord Cacique of all the Indians won't drink and won't smoke," said Don Smith, "so we will offer him incense," and, taking a plate, he filled it with dry tobacco and cigarette paper, to which he set fire. Then he placed the plate on the table before me, so that the fumes of the tobacco rose into the air about my head. "There, now he looks like a real god," said the Americano, clapping his hands. "I say, José, let us make a sacrifice to him. There is the girl who ran away last week, and whom we caught with the dogs." "No, no, comrade," broke in José, "none of your jokes tonight. You forget that we have a visitor." "Not but what I should like to sacrifice this old demino of an Indian to himself," he added in an outburst of drunken fury. "Curse him! He insulted me and my father and mother yonder on board the ship." "And are you going to put up with that from this wooden Indian god? Why, if I were in your place by now, I would have filled him as full of holes as a coffee roaster, just to let the lies out." "That's what I want to do," said José, gnashing his teeth. "He has insulted me and threatened me, and he ought to pay for it, the black thief," and drawing a large knife, he flourished it in my face. I did not shrink from it. I did not so much as suffer my eyelids to tremble, though the steel flashed within an inch of them, for I knew that if once I showed fear he would strike. Therefore I said calmly, "You are pleased to jest, señor, and your jests are somewhat rude, but I pass them by, for I know that you cannot harm me because I am your guest, and those who kill a guest are not gentlemen but murderers, which the high-born Don José Moreno could never be." "Stick the pig, José," said Smith. "He is insulting you again. It will save you trouble afterwards." Then, as Don José again advanced upon me with the knife, of a sudden the señor sprang up from his chair and stood between us. "Come, friend," he said, "a joke is a joke, but you are carrying this too far, according to your custom." And seizing the man by the shoulders, he put out all his great strength and swung him back with such force that, striking against the long table with his thighs, he rolled on to it and over it, falling heavily to the ground upon the farther side, whence he rose cursing with rage. By now Don Pedro, who had wakened, or affected to waken, from his sleep, thought that the time had come to interfere. "Peace, little ones, peace," he cried sleepily from his hammock. "Remember that the men are guests, and cease brawling. Let them go to bed. It is time for them to go to bed, and they need rest. By tomorrow your differences will be healed up forever." "I take the hint," said the señor with forced gaiety. "Come, Ignatio, let us sleep off our host's good wine. Gentlemen, sweet dreams to you," and he walked across the hall, followed by myself. At the door I turned my head and looked back. Every man in the room was watching us intently, and it seemed to me that the drunkenness had passed from their faces, scared away by the sense of some great wickedness about to be worked. Don Smith was whispering into the ear of José, who still held the knife in his hand, but the rest were staring at us as people stare at men passing to the scaffold. Even Don Pedro, wide awake now, sat up in his hammock and peered with his horny eyes, while the Indian girl Luisa, her hand upon the cord, watched our departure with some such face as mourners watch the outbearing of a corpse. All this I noted in a moment as I crossed the threshold and went forward down the passage, and as I went I shivered, for the scene was uncanny and fateful. Presently we were in the abbot's chamber, our sleeping place, and had locked the door behind us. Near the washstand, on which burned a single candle set in the neck of a bottle, sat Molas, his face buried in his hands. "Have they brought you no supper, that you look so sad?" asked the señor. "The woman Luisa gave me to eat," he whispered. "Listen, lord, and you, Señor Strickland, our fears are well founded. There is a plot to murder us tonight. Of this the woman is sure, for she heard some words pass between Don Pedro and a white man called Smith. Also she saw one of the half-breeds fetch spades from the garden and place them in readiness, which spades are to be used in hollowing our graves beneath this floor." Now, when we heard this, our hearts sank, for it was terrible to think that we were doomed within a few hours to lie beneath the ground wherein our living feet were resting. Yet, if these assassins were determined upon our slaughter, our fate seemed certain, since that we had only knives wherewith to defend ourselves, for though we had saved the pistols and some powder in a flask, the damp had reached the latter during the shipwreck, so that it could not be relied upon. "I am afraid that we have been too venturesome in coming here," I said, "and that unless we can escape at once, we must be prepared to pay the price of our folly with our lives." "Do not be downcast, lord," answered Molas, "for you have not heard all the tale. The woman has shown me a means whereby you can save yourselves from death, at any rate for to night. Come here." And leading us across the room, he knelt upon the floor at a spot almost opposite the picture of the abbot, and pressed on a panel in the low wainscoting of cedar wood with which the wall was clothed to the height of about 3 feet. The panel slid aside, leaving a space barely large enough for a man to pass. Through this opening we crept one by one and descended 4 narrow steps, to find ourselves in a chamber hollowed out of the foundation of the wall, so small that there was only just room for the 3 of us to stand in it, our heads being some inches above the level of the floor. Here I may tell you, Señor Jones, that though I have never shown it to you, this place still exists, as you may discover by searching the wainscoting. For many years I have used it for the safe keeping of papers and valuables. There, by the way, you will find that emerald which I showed you on the first night of our meeting. What the purpose of this chamber was in the time of the abbots I do not know, and perhaps it is well not to inquire, though they also may have used it to store their wealth. How can we save ourselves by crouching here like rats in a drain?" I asked Molas. "Doubtless the secret of the hiding place is known to those who live in the house, and they will drag us out and butcher us." "The woman Luisa says that it is known to none except herself, lord, for she declares that not 2 months ago she discovered it for the first time by accident of the broom with which she was sweeping the floor, striking against the springs of the panel. Now let us come out for a while, for it is not yet 11 o'clock, and she says that there will be no danger till after midnight." "Has she any plan for our escape?" I asked. "She has a plan, though she is doubtful of its success. When the murderers have been and found us gone, they will think either that we are wizards or that we have made our way out of the house, and will search no more till dawn. Meanwhile, if she can, Luisa will return, and, entering the chamber that by the secret entrance, will lead us to the chapel, whence she thinks that we may fly into the forest." "Where is the secret entrance, Molas?" "I do not know, lord. She had no time to tell me, but the murderers will come by it. She did tell me, however, that she believes that a man and a woman are imprisoned near the chapel, though she knows nothing of them and never visits the place because the Indians deem it to be haunted. Doubtless these two are Zibalbay and his daughter, so that if you live to come so far, you may find them there and speak with them." "Why do you say 'if you live,' Molas?" "Because I think, lord, that then I shall be already dead. At least, death waits on me." "Well, what do you mean?" asked the señor. "I will tell you. After the woman Luisa had gone, I ate food she brought me, and drank some wine. Then I think that I fell asleep, for when I awoke the candle had burned out, and I was in darkness. Hastily I turned to search for another candle that I had placed by the bottle, and was about to make fire when something drew my eyes, causing me to look up. This was what I saw. At the far end of the chamber, enclosed in a film of such pale light as is given by the glow fly, stood the figure of a man, and that man myself, dressed as I am now. There I stood, surrounded by faint fire, and though the face was the face of a dead man, yet the hand was not dead, for it beckoned towards me through the darkness. Now I saw, and the cold sweat of fear broke out upon me, so that I could scarcely light the candle which I held. At length, however, it burned brightly, and holding it over my head, I walked towards the spot where I had seen the shadow, only to find that it was gone." "Or, in other words, that you had slept off your indigestion," said the señor. "I congratulate you on getting rid of it so soon." "It is easy to mock," answered Molas, "but that which I have seen, and I know that it portends my death. Well, so be it. I am not yet old, but I have lived long enough, and now it is time to go. May Heaven have mercy upon my sins, and thus let it be." After this the señor and I strove to reason him out of his folly, but in vain, nor, in fact, was it altogether a folly, seeing that Molas was doomed to die upon the morrow, though whether the vision that he saw came to warn him of his fate, or was but a dream, it is not for me to say. Presently we ceased talking of ghosts and omens, for we must look to our own bodies and the necessities of the hour. Some minutes before midnight we extinguished the light, and, creeping one by one through the hole in the panelling, we closed it behind us and took our stand in the little dungeon. Here the darkness was awful, and as the warmth of the wine that we had drunk passed from our veins, fears gathered thick upon us and oppressed our souls. Those hours on the sinking ship had been evil, but what were they compared to this? Deep as was the silence, yet there were noises in it, strange creaks and flutterings that thrilled our marrows. We prayed till we were weary. Then, for my part, I tried to doze, only to find that at such a time sleep was worse than waking, for my imagination peopled it with visions, till it seemed to me that all the painted horrors on the walls of the chamber took life and enacted themselves before my eyes. I heard the groaning of the martyrs, and the cruel jeers of those who watched their agony, urged on by the hard-faced abbot whose picture hung above us. Then the vision changed, and I seemed to see the tragedy of the two Americans of whose fate the señor had told me, and whose blood still stained the floor. The darkness opened, as it were, and I saw the beds on which they were sleeping, heavily stalwart men in the prime of life. Then appeared figures standing over them, Don Pedro, Don José, and others, while from the shadows behind peeped the wicked face of their countryman, Don Smith. The bedclothes were twitched away, and once more all was black, but in the darkness I heard the sound of blows and groaning, of the hurrying feet of murderers, and the clinking of bags of money stolen from the dead men. Now the señor touched me, and I woke with a start. "Hark!" he whispered into my ear. "I hear men creeping about the room." "For the love of God, be silent," I answered, gripping his hand. End of chapter 8. By H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 9. The Duel. Now we placed our ears against the panelling and listened. First we heard the creaks that were loud in the stillness, then soft heavy noises such as are made by a cat when it jumps from a height to the ground, and a gentle rubbing as of stockinged feet upon the floor. After this for some seconds came silence, that presently was broken by the clink of steel and the sound of heavy blows delivered upon a soft substance with swords and knives. The murderers were driving their weapons through the bedclothes, thinking that we slept beneath them. Next we heard whisperings and muttered oaths. Then a voice, Don José's, said, "Be careful, the beds are empty." Another instant and candles were lit, for their light reached us through small peepholes in the panel, and by putting our eyes to these we could see what passed in the room. There before us we beheld Don José, Don Smith, and 4 of their companions, all armed with knives or machetes, while framed, as it were, in the wall, in the place that had been occupied by the picture of the abbot, stood our host, Don Pedro, holding a candle above his head, and glaring with his fish-like eyes into every corner of the room. "Where are they?" he said. "Where are the wizards? Find them quick and kill them." Now the men ran to and fro about the chamber, dragging aside the beds and staring at the pictures on the wall as though they expected to see us there. "They are gone," said José at length. "That Indian Ignacio has conjured them away. He is a demonio and not a man. I thought it from the first." "Impossible!" cried Don Pedro, who was white with rage and fear. "The door has been watched ever since they entered it, and no living thing could force those bars. Search, search! They must be hidden." "Search yourself," answered Don Smith sullenly. "They're not here. Perhaps they discovered the trick of the picture and escaped down the passage to the chapel." "It cannot be," said Don Pedro again, "for just now I was in the chapel and saw no signs of them. We have some traitor among us who has led them from the house. By heaven, if I find him out," and he uttered a fearful oath. "Shall we bring the dogs?" asked José, and I trembled at his words. "They might smell their footing." "Fool, what is the use of dogs in a place where all of you have been tramping?" answered the father. "Tomorrow at dawn we will try them outside, for these men must be found and killed, or we are ruined. Already the authorities suspect us because of the disappearance of the 2 Americanos, and they will send soldiers from Vera Cruz to shoot us down, for without a doubt this Inglés is rich and powerful. It is certain that they are not here, but perhaps they are hidden elsewhere in the building. Come, let us search the passages and the roof." and he vanished into the wall, followed by the others, leaving the chamber as dark and silent as it had been before their coming. For a while the danger had passed, and we pressed each other's hands in gratitude, for to speak or even to whisper we did not dare. 10 minutes or more went by, when once again we heard sounds, and a light appeared in the room, borne in the hand of Don Pedro, who was accompanied by his son Don José. "They have vanished," said the old man. "The devil, their master knows how. Well, tomorrow we must hunt them out if possible. Till then nothing can be done. You were a fool to bring them here, José. Have I not told you that no money should tempt me to have more to do with the death of a white man?" "I did it for revenge, not money," answered José. "A nice revenge," said his father, "a revenge that is likely to cost us all our lives, even in this country. I tell you that, if they are not found tomorrow and silenced, I shall leave this place and travel into the interior, where no law can follow us, for I do not wish to be shot down like a dog. Listen, José. Bid those rascals to give up the search and go to bed. It is useless. Then do you come quietly to my room, and we will visit the Indian and his daughter. If we are to screw their secret out of them, it must be done tonight, for, like a fool, I told that Englishman the story when the wine was in me, thinking that he would never live to repeat it. Yes, it must be tonight, for tomorrow we may have to fly. But what if the brutes won't speak, father?" "We will find means to make them," answered the old man with a hideous chuckle. "But whether they speak or not, they must be silenced afterwards." And he drew his hand across his throat, adding, "Come." An hour passed while we stood in the hole, trembling with excitement, hope, and fear, and then once more we heard footfalls, followed presently by the sound of a voice whispering on the farther side of the panel. "Are you there, lord?" the whisper said. "It is I, Luisa." "Yes," I answered. Now she touched the spring and opened the panel. "Listen," she said. "They have gone to sleep, all of them, but before dawn they will be up again to search for you far and wide. Therefore you must do one of two things: lie hid here perhaps for days, or take your chance of escape at once." "How can we escape?" I asked. "There is but one way, lord, through the chapel. The door into it is locked, but I can show you a place from which the priest used to watch those below, and thence, if you are brave, you can drop to the ground beneath, for the height is not great. Once there, you can escape into the garden through the window over the altar, which is broken, as I have seen from without, though to do so perhaps you will have to climb upon each other's shoulders. Then you must fly as swiftly as you can by the light of the moon, which has risen. The dogs have been gorged and tied up, so, if the heart is your friend, you may yet go unharmed." Now I spoke to the señor, saying, "Although the woman does not know it, I think it is likely that we shall find company in this chapel, seeing that the Indian and his daughter are imprisoned there, where Don Pedro and José had gone to visit them. The risk is great. Shall we take it?" "Yes," answered the señor after a moment's thought, "for it is better to take a risk than to perish by inches in this hole of starvation, or perhaps to be discovered and murdered in cold blood. Also, we have travelled far and undergone much to find this Indian, and if we lose our chance of doing so, we may get no other." "What do you say, Molas?" I asked. "I say that the words of the señor are wise, also that it matters little to me what we do, since, whether I turn to left or right, death waits for me on my path." Now, one by one, we climbed through the false panel, and by the light of the moon Luisa led us across the chamber to the spot between the beds where hangs the picture of the abbot, which picture, that is painted on a slab of wood, proved to be only a cunningly designed door constructed to swing upon a pivot. Placing her knee on the threshold of the secret door, Luisa scrambled into the passage beyond. When the rest of us stood by her side, she closed the panel, and bidding us cling to one another and be silent, she took me by the hand and guided us through some passages, till at length she whispered: "Be cautious now, for we come to the place whence you must drop into the chapel, and there is a stairway to your right." We passed the stairway and turned a corner, Luisa still leading. Next instant she staggered back into my arms, murmuring: "Mother of Heaven, the ghosts, the ghosts!" Indeed, had I not held her, she would have fled. Still grasping her hand, I pushed forward to find myself standing in a small recess, the one I showed you, Señor Jones, that was placed about 10 feet above the floor of the chapel, and, like other places in this house, so arranged that the abbot or monk in authority, without being seen himself, could see and hear all that passed beneath him. One thing I am sure, that during all the generations that are gone, no monk watching here ever saw a stranger sight than that which met my eyes. The chancel of the chapel was lit up by shafts of brilliant moonlight that poured through the broken window, and by a lamp which stood upon the stone altar. Within the circle of strong light thrown by this lamp were 4 people, namely, Don Pedro and his son Don José, an old Indian, and a girl. On either side of the altar, then, as now, rose 2 carven pillars of sapote wood, the tops of which were fashioned into the figures of angels, and to these columns the old Indian and the woman were tied, one to each column, their hands being joined together at the back of the pillars in such a manner as to render them absolutely helpless. My eyes rested first upon the woman who was nearest to me, and seeing her, even as she was then, dishevelled, worn with pain and hunger, her proud face distorted by agony of mind and impotent rage, I no longer wondered that both Molas and Don Pedro had raved about her beauty. She was an Indian, but such an Indian as I had never known before, for in colour she was almost white, and her dark and waving hair hung in masses to her knees. Her face was oval and small featured, and in it shone a pair of wonderful dark blue eyes, while the clinging white robe she wore revealed the loveliness of her tall and delicate shape. Bad as the girl's plight, that of the old man her father, who was none other than Zibalbay we had come to seek, seemed even worse. As Molas had described him, he was thin and very tall, with white hair and beard, wild and hawk-like eyes, and aquiline features, nor had Don Pedro spoken more than the truth when he said that he looked like a king. His robe had been torn from him, leaving him half naked, and on his forehead, breast, and arms were blood and bruises, which clearly had been caused by a riding whip that lay broken at his feet. It was not difficult to guess who had broken it, for in front of the old man, breathing heavily and wiping the perspiration from his brow, stood Don José. "This mule won't stir," he said to his father in Spanish. "Ask the girl. It must wake her up to see the old man knocked about." Then Don Pedro slipped off the altar rail upon which she had been seated, and advancing to the woman, he peered at her with his leaden eyes. "My dear," he said to her in the Mayan language, "this sight must grieve you. Put an end to it, then, by telling us of that place where so much gold is hidden." "As with my last breath, daughter," broke in Zibalbay, "I command you to say nothing. No, not if you see them murder me by inches before your eyes." "Silence, you dog," said Don José, striking him across the lips with his hand. Oh, that I were free to avenge you," gasped the girl as she strained and tore at the ropes which held her. "Don't be in a hurry, my love," sneered Don José. "Wait a while, and you will have yourself to avenge as well as your father. If he won't speak, I think we can find a way to make you talk. Only I do not want to be rough with you unless I am forced to. You are too pretty, much too pretty." The girl shivered, gasping with fear and hate, and was silent. "What shall we try him with now?" he went on, addressing Don Pedro. "Hot steel or cold? Make up your mind, for I'm growing tired. Well, if you won't, just hand me that /machete, will you? Now, friend," he said, addressing the Indian, "for the last time I ask you to tell us where is that temple full of gold of which you spoke to your daughter in my father's hearing." "There is no such place, white man," he answered sullenly. "Indeed, friend. Then will you explain where you found those little ingots which we captured from the Indian who had been visiting you, and whence came this /machete?" And he pointed to the weapon in his hand. It was a sword of great beauty, as I could see even from where we stood, made not of steel but of hardened copper, and having for a handle a female figure with outstretched arms fashioned in solid gold. "The /machete was given to me by a friend," said the Indian. "I do not know where he got it." "Really," answered José with a brutal laugh. "Perhaps you will remember presently. Here, father, warm the point of the /machete in the lamp, will you, while I tell our guest how we are going to serve him and his daughter." Don Pedro nodded, and taking the sword he held the tip of it over the flame, while José, bending forward, whispered into the Indian's ear, pointing from time to time to the girl, who, overcome with faintness or horror, had sunk to the ground, where she was huddled in a heap, half hidden by the masses of her hair. "Are you white men devils?" said the old man at length, with a groan that seemed to burst from the bottom of his heart. "And is there no law or justice among you?" "Not at all, friend," answered José. "We are good fellows enough, but times are hard, and we must live. As for the rest, we don't trouble over much about law in these parts, and I never heard that unbaptized Indian dogs have any right to justice. Now, once more, will you guide us to the place whence that gold came, leaving your daughter here as hostage for our safety?" "Never," cried the Indian. "Better that we two should perish 100 times than that the ancient secrets of my people should pass to such as you." "So you have secrets after all. Father, is the sword hot?" asked José. "1 minute more, son," said the old man quietly, turning the point in the flame. This was the scene that we witnessed, and these were the words that astonished our ears. "It is time to interfere," muttered the señor, and placing his hand upon the rail, he prepared to drop into the church. Now a thought struck me, and I drew him back to the passage. "Perhaps the door is opened," I said. "Are you going in there?" asked the girl Luisa. "Certainly," I replied. "We must rescue these people or die with them." "Then, señors, farewell. I have done all I can for you, and now the saints must be your guide, for if I am seen they will kill me, and I have a child for whose sake I desire to live. Again, farewell," and she glided away like a shadow. We crept forward down the stair. At the foot of it was a little door which, as we had hoped, stood ajar. For a moment we consulted together, and then we crawled on through the gloom towards the ring of light about the altar. Now José had the heated sword in his hand. "Look up, my dear, look up," he said to the girl, patting her on the cheek. "I am about to baptize your excellent father according to the rites of the Christian religion, by marking him with a cross upon the forehead," and he advanced the glowing point of the sword towards the Indian's face. At that instant Molas pinned him from behind, causing him to drop the weapon, while I did the same office by Don Pedro, holding him so that, struggle as he might, he could not stir. "Make a sound, either of you, and you are dead," said the señor, picking up the /machete and placing its hot point against José's breast, where it slowly burnt its way through his clothes. "What are we to do with these men?" he asked. "Kill them as they would have killed us," answered Molas, "or, if you fear the task, cut loose the old man yonder and let him avenge his own and his daughter's wrongs. What say you, Ignatio? I seek no man's blood, but for our own safety it is well that these wretches should die. Away with them." Now Don Pedro began to bleat inarticulately in his terror, and that hero, José, burst into tears and pleaded for his life, writhing with pain the while, for the point of the sword scorched him. "You are an English gentleman," he groaned. "You cannot butcher a helpless man as though he were an ox." "As you tried to butcher us in the chamber yonder, us who saved your life," answered the señor. "Still you are right. I cannot do it because, as you say, I am a gentleman. Molas, loose this dog, and if he tries to run, put your knife through him. José Moreno, you have a sword by your side, and I hold one in my hand. I will not murder you, but we have a quarrel, and we will settle it here and now." "You are mad, señor," I said, "to risk your life thus. I myself will kill him rather than it should be so." "Will you fight if I loosen you, José Moreno?" he asked, making me no answer, "or will you be killed where you stand?" "I will fight," he replied. "Good. Let him free, Molas, and be ready with your knife." "I command you." I began, but already the man was loose, and the señor stood waiting for him, his back to the door, and grasping the Indian /machete handled with the golden woman. Now José glanced round as though he sought a means of escape, but there was none, for in front there was a /machete, and behind there was a knife of Molas. For some seconds, 10 perhaps, they stood facing each other in the ring of the lamplight, whilst the moonbeams played faintly about their heads. We watched in utter silence, the Indian girl shaking the long hair from her face and leaning forward as far as her bonds would allow, that she might see the battle to the death between him who had insulted and tormented her, and the noble looking white man who had appeared out of the gloom to bring her deliverance. It was a strange scene, for the contrast of light and darkness, or of good and evil, is not greater than was that of these two men, and what made it stranger were the place and hour. Behind them was the half-lit emptiness of the deserted chapel. Before them stood the holy crucifix and the desecrated altar of God, and beneath their feet lay the stones of the forgotten dead, whose spirits mayhap were watching them from the shadows as earnestly as did our living eyes. Yes, that midnight scene of death and vengeance enacted in the House of Peace was very strange, and even now it thrills my blood to think of it. From the moment that I saw them fronting each other, my fears for the issue vanished. Victory was written on the calm features of the señor, and more especially in his large blue eyes, that of a sudden had grown stern as those of an avenging angel, while the face of José told only of baffled fury struggling with bottomless despair. He was about to die, and the terror of approaching death unnerved him. Still, it was he who struck the first, for, stepping forward, he aimed a desperate blow at the señor's head, who, springing aside, avoided it, and, in return, ran him through the left arm. With a cry of pain, the Mexican sprang back, followed by the señor, at whom he cut from time to time, but without result, for every blow was parried. Now they were within the altar rails, and now his back was against one of the carved pillars of sapote wood, that to which the girl was tied. Further he could not fly, but stayed there, laying about him wildly, so that the woman at the other side of the pillar crouched upon the ground to avoid the sweep of his sword. Then the end came, for the señor, who was waiting his chance, drew suddenly within reach, only a step back, so that the furious blow aimed at his head struck with a ringing sound upon the marble floor, where the mark of it may yet be seen. Before Don José, whose arm was numbed by the shock, could lift the sword again, the señor ran in, and for the second time thrust with all his strength, but now the aim was truer, for his /machete/ pierced the Mexican through the heart, so that he fell down and died there upon the altar step. Now I must tell you of my own folly that went near to bringing us all to death. You will remember that I was holding Don Pedro, and how it came about I know not, but in my joy and agitation I slacked my grip, so that with a sudden twist he was able to tear himself from my hands, and in a twinkling of an eye was gone. I bounded after him, but too late, for as I reached the door it was slammed in my face, nor could I open it, for on the chapel side was neither key nor handle. "Fly!" I cried, rushing back to the altar. "He has escaped, and will presently be here with the rest." The señor had seen, and was already engaged in severing with his sword the rope that bound the girl, while Molas cut loose the father. Now I leapt upon the altar. May the sacrilege be forgiven to my need, and, springing at the stonework of the broken window, I made shift to pull myself up with the help of Molas, pushing from below. Seated upon the window ledge, I leaned down, and catching the Indian Zibalbay by the wrist, for he was too stiff to leap, with great efforts I dragged him to me, and bade him drop without fear to the ground, which was not more than 10 feet below us. Next came his daughter, then the señor, and last of all Molas, so that within 3 minutes from the escape of Don Pedro we stood unhurt outside the chapel among the bushes of the garden. Where to now? I asked, for the place was strange to me. The girl Maya looked round her, then she glanced up at the heavens. "Follow me," she said, "I know a way," and started down the garden at a run. Presently we came to a wall the height of a man, beyond which was a thick hedge of aloes. Over the wall we climbed, and through the aloes we burst a path, not without doing ourselves some hurt, for the thorns were sharp, to find ourselves in a milpa or cornfield. Here the girl stopped, again searching the stars, and at that moment we heard the sounds of shouting, and looking back saw lights moving to and fro in the /hacienda. "We must go forward or perish," I said. "Don Pedro has aroused his men." Then she dashed into the milpa, and we followed her. There was no path, and the cornstalks that stood high above us caught our feet and shook the dew in showers upon our heads, till our clothes were filled with water like a sponge. Still we struggled on, one following the other, for 15 minutes or more, till at length we were clear of the cultivated land and standing on the borders of the forest. "Halt," I said. "Where do we run to? The road lies to the right, and by following it we may reach a town." "To be arrested as murderers," broke in the señor. "You forget that José Moreno is dead at my hands, and his father will swear our lives away, or that at the best we shall be thrown into prison. No, we must hide in the bush." "Sirs," said the old Indian, speaking for the first time, "I know a secret place in the forest, an ancient and ruined building where we may take refuge for a while if we can reach it. But first I ask, who are you?" "You should know me, Zibalbay," said Molas, "seeing that I am a messenger whom you sent to search for him that you desire to find, the Lord and Keeper of the Heart," and he pointed to me. "Are you that man?" asked the Indian. "I am," I answered, "and I have suffered much to find you, but now is no time to talk. Guide us to this hiding place of yours, for our danger is great." Then once more the girl took the lead, and we plunged forward into the forest, often stumbling and falling in the darkness, till the dawn broke in the east, and the shoutings of our pursuers died away. End of chapter 9. The World by H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 10. How Molas Died. For some minutes we rested to recover our breath. Then we started forward again. In front went the girl, Maya, our guide, whom the señor led by the hand, while behind followed Zibalbay, supported by Molas and myself. At first these two had run as quickly as the rest of us, but now all the fatigues and terrors that they had undergone took hold of them, so that from time to time they were forced to stop to rest. This was little to be wondered at, indeed, seeing that during 5 days they had eaten no solid food, for it had been Don Pedro's purpose to starve their secret out of them. Doubtless he would have succeeded in this design, or in doing them to death, had it not been for a quantity of certain preparation of the cuca leaf, mixed with pounded meat and other ingredients, which they carried with them. Zibalbay had the secret of this Indian food, and by the help of it he and his daughter had journeyed far across unpeopled wastes. For so wonderful are its properties that a piece no larger than a bullet will serve to stay a man's stomach for 24 hours, even when his power is taxed by work or travel. On this nutriment they had sustained themselves, to the amazement of their captor, who could not discover whence they drew their strength. Still, it is a stimulant rather than a food, and so great was their craving to fill themselves that as they ran they plucked cobs of the Indian corn and devoured them. Our path lay through a tropical forest so dense that even when the sun shone the gloom was that of twilight. Many sorts of huge and uncouth trees grew in it, whereof the boughs were starred with orchids and hung with trailing ferns, or in places with long festoons of grey Spanish moss, that gave them a very strange and unnatural appearance. Up these trees climbed creepers, some of them thicker than a man's thigh, and beneath them the ground was clothed with soft wooded bush, or with vast brakes of a plant that in Mexico attains a height of from 10 to 12 feet, which the señor told me is cultivated in English gardens under the name of Indian shot. Slowly and with much toil we forced a path through this mass of vegetation. Now we were creeping over the rotten trunks of fallen and fern-encumbered trees. Now, foot by foot, we must make our way between the stout stems of the Indian shot, and now our clothes were caught and our flesh was torn by the hook-like thorns and brambles, or our feet tripped in the roots of climbing plants. No breath of air penetrated that measureless thicket, whereof the stagnant atmosphere, laden with the decay of ages, choked and almost overpowered us, causing the sweat to start from every pore. Above us, hiding the sky, hung masses of deep green foliage, beneath which we struggled on in the solemn gloom and the silence that was broken only from time to time by the grunting of an ape, or by a distant crash as some great tree, after centuries of life, fell with a noise like thunder to the earth from whence it sprang. This forest that seemed so destitute of life was peopled by millions of insects, all of them venomous. Garrapatos, tiny grey flies, wood wasps, and ants, black and red, tormented us with their bites and stings till we groaned aloud in misery, then, remembering our danger, pushed on again. Thus 2 hours and more passed, until, reaching a little stream that ran through a ravine in the forest, we paused to drink and to cool our fevered feet and hands. Zibalbay sank exhausted on the bank, where I brought him water in my sombrero, while his daughter sat herself down on a stone in the stream, suffering it to flow over her feet and ankles that by now were swollen with ant bites and bleeding from the cuts and thorns and grasses. Presently she looked up, and seeing the señor, who stood upon the bank talking to me, she invited him with a motion of her hand to seat himself beside her. "What is your name, white man?" she asked. "James Strickland, lady." "James Strickland," she repeated with some difficulty. "I thank you, James Strickland, for rescuing my father from torment and me from insult, and because of that deed I, Maya of the Heart, whom many have served, am your servant for ever." "Oh, you should thank my friend Don Ignatio," he said, pointing to me. For a few moments she looked at me searchingly, then replied, "I thank him also, but you I thank the most, for your hand rid me of that hateful man and saved us." "It is early to return thanks, lady," he said. "We are not out of danger yet." "I have little fear now that we have escaped from that dreadful house," she answered almost indifferently, "since our hiding place is at hand. Also, how can they find us in this forest? Hark, what was that?" As she spoke, a faint and distant sound fell upon our ears, such a sound as might have been made by a bell struck far away at night. "That is how they will find us," he said, springing to his feet. "Do you hear, Ignatio? The dogs have hit our trail. Which way does our road run now, lady?" "Along the banks of the stream." "Then we must go forward in the water," said the señor. "It is our only chance, for the hounds cannot track us there." Now we began to scramble down the bed of the stream as fast as the boulders and the weariness of Zibalbay would allow. Fortunately it was not a broad river, nor very deep. Still, sometimes we could scarcely stand in the rapids, and twice, not daring to set foot upon the bank, we were forced to swim the length of the pools, which we did in terror, fearing lest they should be haunted by alligators. For something over an hour we followed the stream thus, till suddenly Maya halted, saying that if we would gain the building where they had dwelt, we must leave the water and plunge into the forest. By now we were exhausted. Indeed, unless he were carried, the old Indian, Zibalbay, could not have gone another mile. So, notwithstanding the danger of setting foot upon the land, on learning that the place was near and that food was to be found in it, we hesitated no longer, but once more began to thread the bush. Not more than 300 paces from the banks of the river we came upon a high mound densely overgrown with trees, between the boles of which appeared masses of cut stone. "This is the place," gasped Zibalbay. "Look, yonder above us are the walls of the temple, and here is the stairway that led to it," and he pointed to a long flight of crumbling stone steps, almost hidden in ferns and bushes, which stretched from the base of the pyramid to the ancient Indian fane on its crest. Up these steps we went with caution, for the climb was dangerous, Molas carrying Zibalbay upon his back, since so weary was he that the old Indian could mount them in no other fashion. The staircase was built in 3 flights, the top flight now almost entirely broken away, emerging on what once had been a broad and splendid terrace, but today was a chaos of stonework, in the crevices of which grew bushes and even large trees. Over the head of the stairway still stood a colossal arch, sculptured with the figures of gods and beasts. Not a true arch, however, for these were unknown to the old Indian builders, but fashioned of stones which projected further and further, till the topmost of them overlapped each other. This arch, if so I may call it, was in the last stage of decay. Indeed, the crown of it, a mass of masonry that must have weighed between 100 and 200 tons, had been nearly separated from its supports by the action of time and rain, aided perhaps by a shock of earthquake, and hung threateningly over the top steps of the stair. In truth, so slight were the attachments which remained between it and its supporting side columns and buttresses, that at first sight it seemed as though it must fall at once. A closer examination showed, however, that it was held in place by 3 or 4 great roots, which, springing from trees that grew upon the crown of the arch in the course of years, had thrust themselves deep into the crevices of the masonry of the massive pillars, and through their foundations into the soil beneath. Beyond the arch, on the farther side of the terrace, rose the ruined temple, a long single-storied building with a flat roof whereon grew many shrubs and palms. Passing through the central doorway of this temple, Maya led us into a chamber decorated everywhere with serpents carved in stone, which had been occupied and recently, for it was clean, and upon the floor were ashes and bits of burnt wood. In the corner also lay a little pile of articles covered with a serape that Maya hastened to remove, revealing, amongst other things, an earthen cooking pot, a copper axe of similar workmanship to the /machete with which the señor had killed Don José, 2 curiously fashioned blow pipes with a supply of poisoned darts, and lastly bags containing dried flesh, beans, and coca paste. "All is safe," she said. "Now let us eat, that we may be strong to meet danger." While we were filling ourselves thankfully with the dried meat, the señor spoke to me, saying he hoped that our pursuit had been abandoned. "You can know little of these men to speak thus," I answered. "They must hunt us down for their own sakes. Also, Don Pedro will certainly seek to avenge the blood of his son. Our only hope is that the water will baffle the hounds, or, if they strike the place where we left it, that the heat of the day may have killed our scent. But I fear this will not be so, since the ground is damp beneath the trees." "Then what do you propose to do?" he asked. "Start on again, or stop here?" "Señor, we must stop here, because we cannot travel further unless we would abandon the old man and his daughter. Moreover, in the forest it would be easy to overwhelm us, but this place is hard to climb, and here at least we may die fighting. Let us make ready for the worst, señor." "How are we to make ready," he asked, "when we have nothing to fight with except machetes and Indian blow pipes? The powder in the pistol flasks is damp, and the caps will miss fire, so that if we are attacked our death is certain." "It seems so," I answered. "Yet, if it pleases God, we may live. Yonder lie stones in plenty. Let us pile them up beneath the archway. Perhaps we can kill some of our foes by rolling them down the steps." This we did then, while Maya watched us. At length the task was finished, and as we turned to leave the heaps of stone, of a sudden we heard a dog baying down the river, followed by the sound of men and horses forcing a path through the bush. For a while we stared at each other in silence. Then Molas said: "They are coming." "If so, I wish they would come quickly," answered the señor. "Why, white man, are you afraid?" asked Maya. "Yes, very much," he answered with a little laugh, "for the odds are heavy, and probably we shall soon be killed. That is, all the men among us will be killed. Does not the prospect frighten you?" "Why should it?" she answered with a shrug and a smile, "seeing that if it comes to the worst I shall be killed too, and spared a long journey home." "How can you be sure of that, lady?" "So," she answered, holding a tiny blowpipe dart before his eyes, "if I prick myself with this here," and she touched a large vein in her neck, "in 1 minute I shall be asleep, and in 2 I shall be dead." "I understand, but you talk of death very easily for one so young and beautiful." "If so, señor, it is because I have not found life too soft, nor," she added with a sigh, "do I know what destiny awaits me in the future, but I do know that when we sleep upon the heart of heaven we shall find peace, if nothing more." "Oh, I hope so," said the señor. "Look, here they come," and as he spoke a party of 7 or 8 men, 3 of them riding on mules, appeared at the foot of the mound, and dismounting, picketed their animals to trees. "Now for it," said the señor, rising and shaking himself like a dog that leaves the water. "I wonder how many of us will be left alive when the sun sets." As he spoke, one of the men reached the foot of the stairway, holding a great hound at leash. For a moment the dog sniffed the stones, then lifting his head he bayed aloud, whereat the band shouted, for they knew that they had trapped us. Still, for a while they did not advance, but gathering themselves in a knot, they consulted together earnestly. We looked at each other in despair, for truly our case was desperate. Fly we could not, and we had no arms wherewith to fight. Therefore it seemed certain that within some few minutes we must lose our lives at the hands of these murderers, if indeed they chose to kill us outright in mercy. The señor hid his face in his hands for a while, then he looked up and said: "Can we bargain with them, Ignatio?" "Impossible," I answered. "What have we to give that they cannot take?" "Then there is nothing for it except to die as bravely as we may," he answered. "This is the end of our search for the Golden City. The quest has not been a lucky one, Ignatio." Now the old Indian, Zibalbay, who was crouched upon the ground beside us, spoke for the first time, saying: "Friends, why do you not fly? Doubtless you can find a path down the further side of the pyramid, and in the forest you may hide from these men." "How can we fly," answered the señor, "when you have no strength to walk a step?" "I am old and ready to die," he answered. "Leave me here, and be sure that when the time comes I shall know how to slip through the grasp of these villains. My daughter, you go with them. You have the holy symbol, and should you escape and prove this stranger to be the man whom we seek, lead him to our home, that things may befall as they are fated." "Please, my father," said Maya, throwing her arms about his neck, "together we will live or perish. These señors may go if it pleases them, but here I stay with you." "And so do I," said Molas, "for I am weary of flying from the death that dogs me. Also it is too late to talk of flight, for look, they are coming up the stair, the 8 of them, with Don Pedro and the /Americano at their head." I looked. It was true. Already they had climbed half the steps of the first flight. "Oh, for some rifles!" groaned the señor. "It is useless to cry for what we have not," I answered. "God can help us if He wishes, and if He does not, we must bow to His will." Then there was silence, broken only by the voice of Zibalbay, who, standing behind us, lifted his hands to heaven and prayed aloud to his gods to bring a vengeance upon our foes. Now we could see through the trees and bushes that the men were beginning to climb the second flight. "Come, let us do something," said the señor, and running to the piles of stones which we had prepared, he called to us to help him roll the heaviest of them upon the enemy. This we did for a while, but without effect, for the tree trunks turned our missiles. Moreover, those against whom they were directed, taking cover at the sides of the stairway, opened so sharp a fire on us with their rifles that in a few minutes we were driven from the stone heaps and forced to retreat behind the shelter of the arch. Now they came on again, till presently they reached the foot of the third flight and paused to take breath. Then it was that Molas, seizing one of the Indian blowpipes, ran out on the terrace, followed by the señor, though why the latter went I do not know, for he could not use the weapon. Before the men beneath were aware of their presence, Molas had set the blowpipe to his lips and discharged the poisoned dart among them. As it chanced, it struck the Texan smith full in the throat. Watching him round the corner of the arch, I saw him lift his hand to pull out the dart. Then of a sudden he fell to the ground. At that instant a storm of bullets swept through the archway, aimed at Molas and the señor as they fled back for refuge. I saw Molas fall, and the señor stopped to lift him to his feet, and as he was in the very act, a patch of red appeared upon his face. Another moment and they were under cover. "Are you hurt?" I asked the señor. No, he answered. "My cheek was grazed by a bullet, that's all. Look at Molas. He is shot in the side." "Leave me," said Molas. "It is nothing." Then we were silent. Only Maya sobbed a little as she strove to staunch the blood that flowed from the señor's wound with cobwebs which she gathered from among the stones. "Do not trouble, lady," he said with a sad smile, "for soon there will be other wounds that cannot be dressed. What shall you do?" By way of answer she showed him the poisoned dart, which she held in the hollow of her hand. "I cannot advise you otherwise," he said. "Farewell. I am glad to have met you, and I hope that we may meet again yonder," and he glanced towards the sky. "Now you had best say good bye to your father, for our time is short." She nodded, went to the old man, Zibalbay, who stood silent, stroking his grey beard, and putting her arms about his neck, she kissed him tenderly. Looking out carefully, we saw that the men had dragged Don Smith to the side of the stairway, where some of them supported him while he died of the poison, and others watched for a chance to shoot us should we show ourselves upon the terrace. Presently he was dead, and, cursing us aloud, his companions commenced to mount the third flight with a great caution, for they feared a snare. "Is there nothing to be done to save our lives?" asked the señor in a heavy voice. There was no answer, but of a sudden Molas, who was standing with one hand pressed upon the wound in his side and the other before his eyes, turned and ran into the chamber behind us, whence he reappeared carrying the copper axe. Then, without speaking, he climbed the masonry of the arch with great swiftness till he stood with his feet in the crack beneath the crown of the false arch, which you will remember was held in place only by the tough tree roots that grew from it into the stonework of the buttresses. Supporting himself by a creeper with his left hand, with his right he struck blow after blow at the biggest of these roots, severing them one by one. Now we saw his purpose, to send 200 tons of stonework thundering down the stairway upon the heads of the murderers. "By heavens, that is an answer to my question," said the señor, and he paused and added, "Come down, Molas. If the arch falls, you will fall with it and be crushed." "It matters little," he answered. "This is my doom day. That bullet has cut me inside, and I bleed to death, and on this spot, as I have long feared, it is fated that I should die. Pray for my soul, and farewell." "Fare you well, you gallant man," said the señor. "I have no axe, or I would come with you." "Farewell, Molas, my brother, true servant of the Heart," I echoed. "Of this I am sure, that you shall not lose your reward." Now 3 of the roots were severed, but the fourth and largest, which was thicker than a man's leg, remained, and at this Molas began to hew despairingly. "Are they near?" he gasped, as the white chips flew. We peeped round the corner of the arch and saw that some 70 feet below us the band had halted on the slippery face of the pyramid, fearing they knew not what, for they heard the dull sound of the axe blows, but could not guess what it portended. One of their number was talking to Don Pedro, apparently urging something upon him to which he did not agree, and in this way they wasted 2 minutes before at last the order was given to rush up the remaining steps and take the temple by storm. 2 minutes. It was but a short time, yet it meant much, for only a third of the root remained unsevered, and the bark, cracking and peeling, showed how great the strain upon it. "Quick!" whispered the señor, "they come!" And as he spoke, the handle of the axe broke, and its head fell to the ground. "Now, if the root holds, we are lost," I said. But it was not to be, for Molas still had his heavy hunting knife, and with this he hewed frantically at the wood. At the third cut it began to part, torn slowly asunder as though by the strength of a giant, and while it gave, the vast superincumbent mass of masonry which it had helped to support for so many years shifted a little with a grinding sound, then hung again. "Come down, Molas, come down!" cried the señor. But Molas would not. He struck one more blow, severing the root, and then, with a shout of farewell, either through faintness or by design, he cast himself forward with outstretched arms against the face of the wall. His weight was little indeed, yet it seemed that it sufficed to turn the balance as dust turns a scale, for again the trembling mass moved perceptibly, and the tall trees upon the top of it began to nod as though beneath the sudden pressure of wind. Now it slid forward faster and faster, with sharp sounds like pistol shots came from the heart of it, and the trees above bent like a rod beneath the rush of a fish. Now also, for the first time, the villains on the slope below perceived the doom that threatened them, and uttered such a yell as I have never heard. Some stood still, and some flung themselves down the stair. One only, Don Pedro himself, rushed forward. It was too late. The mass of stonework, 60 feet by 20 in breadth, was falling. It was falling. It fell, taking Molas with it. With a roar like that of thunder, it struck upon the stairway, and bursting into fragments, swept it from end to end. No discharge of grape shot could have been so terrible in its effects as this hurricane of stones that nothing could withstand. Even the big trees which stood in its path were snapped like sticks and borne away upon its crest, as the carved masonry that had been carried up the pyramid by the long labour of the Indians of a bygone age rushed downward to its foot. In less than a minute it was done. The sounds had died away, and nothing was left to tell of what had happened, except a little dust and some remains that had been men. Of all those who stood upon the stairway, only one survived, Don Pedro, who had run forward in the hope of escaping the fall of the arch. As it chanced, he was too late, for though the mass had missed him, a single stone struck him across the middle, breaking his bones and sweeping him to the foot of the first flight, but leaving him alive. When all was finished and the dust had fallen to the earth again, the señor spoke, saying, "Let us go and search for the body of our deliverer." So we went, the three of us, leaving Zibalbay in the temple, but we could not find it. Doubtless to this day Molas lies buried beneath some of the larger blocks of masonry. There were other bodies indeed, from which we did not scruple to take the rifles and whatever else was likely to be of value to us. Better still, tied among some trees near to the foot of the pyramid, we found 4 good mules, one of them laden with ammunition and provisions, for Don Pedro had come out determined to hunt us down, even if he must follow us for days. Having picketed the mules where they could graze, we returned to the temple, bearing with us food and drink, of which we stood in sore need. On our way up the steps, Don Pedro called to us from where he lay, broken and bleeding, against an uprooted tree. "Water!" he cried. "Give me water!" The señor gave him some mixed with brandy that we had found upon the sumpter mule. "Your heart is merciful," said Maya gravely. "I am not cruel, yet I think I should suffer that dog to die untended. All of us have sins to pay for, lady, and the thought of them should teach us charity, especially now when it has pleased God to spare us," answered the señor. "I am dying," moaned the wretch. "My presentiment has come true, and death finds me amongst the ruins. How dare I die, who have been a murderer and a thief from my boyhood?" The señor shrugged his shoulders, for he could not answer this question. "Give me absolution," he went on. "For the love of Christ, give me absolution." "I cannot," said the señor. "I have no authority. Pray to heaven to shrive you, and for your time is short." Then he turned and went, but for a long time we were troubled by the last cries and blasphemies of this most evil man. Indeed, they did not cease till sunset, when, as I suppose, the devil came to claim his own. End of chapter 10. By H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 11. Zibalbay tells his mission. When we reached the ruins of the temple, we ate and drank. Then, knowing that we could travel no further that night, I spoke, saying: "Some 2 months since, Zibalbay, you sent a message by Molas, my foster brother, that man who died to save us this day, to him who among the Indians is known as Lord of the Heart. Your messenger travelled fast and far, by sea and by land, till he found him and delivered the message." "To whom did he deliver it?" asked Zibalbay. "To me, for I am the man you seek, and with my companion I have journeyed here to find you, suffering many dangers and evils on the path." "Prove that you are the man," and he asked me certain questions, to all of which I returned answers. "You are instructed," he said at length, "yet something is lacking. If indeed you are the Lord of the Heart, reveal its mystery to my eyes." "Nay," I answered, "it is you who seek me, not I you. To Molas, your messenger, you showed a certain symbol. Let me see that symbol, for then, and not till then, will I reveal the mystery." Now he looked round him doubtfully and said: "You I have proved, and this woman is my daughter and knows all. But what of the white man? Is it lawful that I should unveil the heart before him?" "It is lawful," I answered, "for this white man is my brother, and we are one till death. Also he is sworn of our brotherhood, and himself for a while was lord and holder of the heart, for I passed it on to him when I thought that I lay dying, and to him cling its virtues and prerogatives. So it comes about that we have no secrets from each other, that his ears are my ears, and his mouth is my mouth. Speak to us, then, as though we were one man, or be silent to both, for I vouch for him and he for me." "Are these things so, white man?" asked Zibalbay, making the sign of the brotherhood. "They are so," replied the señor, giving the countersign. "Then I speak," said Zibalbay. "I speak in the name of the Heart, and woe be to him who betrays the secrets that he learns under cover of this name. Come hither, daughter, and give me that which is hidden about you." Now Maya put her hands to her head, and drawing forth something from the dense masses of her hair, she passed it to her father. "Is this what you would see?" he asked, holding the talisman in the light of the setting sun. I looked, and lo! there before me was the very counterpart of that which had descended to me from my forefathers, and which I wore about my neck. "It would seem so, unless my sight deceives me," I answered. "Is this what you have come so far to seek, Zibalbay?" And I drew forth the ancient symbol of the broken heart. Now he leaned forward and examined first the one half, then the other, searching them with his eyes. Then he clasped his hands, and looking to the heavens, said, "I thank thee, O Nameless One, God of my fathers, that thou hast led my feet aright, and given it to mine eyes to see thy desires. As thou hast prospered the beginning, so prosper thou the end, I beseech thee." Then he turned to me and continued, as in an ecstasy, "Now have day and night come together, and soon shall the new sun rise, the sun of our glory, for already the dawn is breaking. Take that which is in your keeping, and I will take that which is in mine, for not here must they be joined, but far away. Listen, brethren, to my tale, which shall be brief, seeing that, if it be the will of heaven, your eyes shall prove my words, where all things can be made clear to you, and if not, that of which little is told is the more easily forgotten. Perchance, my brethren, you have heard legends of the ancient, undiscovered city, the last home of our race, which is undefiled by the foot of the white conqueror, and the secret sanctuary of the pure faith given to our forefathers by the divine Cucumatz, who is some named Quetzal. We have heard of it, and greatly desire to see it," I answered. "If this be so," went on Zibalbay, "in us you have found those who can guide you to that city of which I am the /cacique/ and hereditary high priest, and my only child here is the heiress and lady. You wonder how it comes then that we, being of this condition, are found unguarded and alone, wandering like beggars in the land of the white man. Listen. The city of the Heart, as it is called, is of all cities the most beautiful and ancient, and once in the far past she ruled these lands from sea to sea, for her walls were built by one of those brethren whom the holy Cucumatz, the white god, left to share his throne after there had been war between the brethren, and they separated, each becoming the father of a nation. So great was her power in the early days that all the cities whose ruins may be found buried in these forests were her tributaries. But as the years went by, hordes of barbarians rolled down upon her frontier towns, so that they were lost to her. Still no enemies came near her gates, and she remained the richest and most powerful of the cities of the world. Now, the city of the Heart is built upon an island in the centre of a lake, but many thousands of her children lived upon the mainland, where they cultivated fields and dug in the earth for gold and gems. So she flourished, and her children with her, till 12 generations since, when there came tidings to the king of that day that a nation of white men had conquered the empires near the sea, putting their inhabitants to the sword and possessing themselves of their wealth. Tidings came also that these white men, having learned the tale of the city of the heart, and of the measureless treasures of gold with which it was adorned, proposed to seek it out and sack it. When the ruling cacique was sure that these things were true, he took counsel with his wise men, and with the oracle of the god which is in the sanctuary, and issued a decree that all those who lived upon the mainland should be brought within the walls of the city, so that the white man might find none to guide them hither. This was done then, and the spoilers sought in vain for many years, till it was reported among them that this legend of a town filled with gold was but a fable. Now, however, great sickness took hold of those who lived in the city of the heart, because it was overfull of men. So great a sickness indeed that soon there was space and to spare for all who remained within its walls. The sickness went away, but as the generations passed, a new and worse trouble fell upon our forefathers. The blood of the people grew old, but few children were born to them. There were none left upon the mainland to replenish the race, and this is our law, a law which cannot be broken under pain of death, that no man or woman may leave our territories to seek a husband or wife of different blood. Thus, then, it has come about that the people have grown less and less, wasting away like snow upon a mountain top in summer, till at length they are dwindled to a few thousands, who in bygone days could count their number by tens and twenties of thousands. Now I, Zibalbay, have ruled this city since I was young, and bitterly has it grieved me to know that before another 100 years have been added to the past, the city, heart of the world, must become nothing but waste, and a home for the dead, though that of those who live therein today reck but little, for the people have no thought for the morrow, and the hearts of its nobles have become gross and their eyes blind. But an ancient prophecy has come down to us from our forefathers, and it is that when once more the two halves of the symbol of the heart are laid side by side in their place upon the altar in the sanctuary of the holy city, then from that hour she shall grow great again. Over this saying I brooded long, and often did I pray that God whom I worship, and whose high priest I am, the nameless God, heart of heaven, and Lord of all the earth, that it would please him to give me light and wisdom, whereby I might find that which was lost, and save the people from perishing, as in a season of drought flowers perish for lack of rain, bringing forth no seed. At length, upon a certain night, it came about that a voice spoke to me in a dream, answering my prayer, bidding me to wander forth from the country of the heart and follow the ancient road towards the sea, for there, near to the eastern shore, I should find that which was lost. Then I summoned the council of the heart, and opened my mind to them, telling them of my dream, and that I purposed to obey it. But they made a mock of me, for they thought me mad, and said that I might go if I wished, for being their ruler they had no power to stay me. but that no man of the people should accompany me across the mountains, for that was against the ancient law. I answered that it was well, and I would go alone, since go I must. Whereon my daughter rose in her place and said that she would journey with me, as she had a right to do, and to this they must consent, though one of their number spoke bitterly against it, for he was my nephew and affianced to my daughter. Was it not so, Maya?" "It was so," she answered with a smile. "To be short," went on Zibalbay, "since my heart was set upon this mission, and my daughter yonder, who is wilful, would not be gainsaid of her desire to accompany me, Tikal, my nephew, was placed over the city to rule as /cacique in my stead until I should return again. Then I left the city with this my daughter, many of the nobles and of the common people accompanying us across the lake and a day's journey beyond it to the mountain pass, where they bade us farewell with tears, for they were certain that we were mad and went to our deaths. Alone we crossed the mountains, and alone, following the traces of the ancient road, we travelled through the desert and the forest that lies beyond it, till at length we reached this secret place and stayed here, for though we were unharmed, danger, toil, and hunger had worn us out. Moreover, we were afraid to venture among the white people. Brethren, there is no need to tell the rest of the tale, for it is known to you. That power which sent me on my mission has guided me through all its troubles, and after much hardship and suffering has caused me to triumph, seeing that tonight we are still alive, having found that which we came forth to seek. Such is my story, brother. Now, if it pleases you, let us hear yours, and learn what purpose led you and your companion here in time to save us from the grip of that white devil who lies dead upon the stairway." Then I spoke, telling Zibalbay and his daughter the story of my life. I have written already, and of my great scheme to build up again that empire which fell in the day of Montezuma. "Now you speak words that are after my own heart," said the old chief. "But tell me, how is it to be done?" "By your help," I answered. "Men are here in plenty, but to use them I must have gold, whereas yonder it seems you have gold and no men. Therefore I ask of you some portion of your useless wealth, that by its help I may lift up your people and my own. Follow me to the city, and if I can bring it about, you shall have all that you desire," he answered. "Brother, our ends are one, and fate has brought us together from far away in order that they may be accomplished. The prophecy is true, and truly have I dreamed. Soon shall the severed symbol be brought together in the sanctuary, and the will of heaven be made clear. Oh, not in vain have I lived and prayed, enduring the mockery of men, for day and night have met, and already the light of the new dawn is shining in the sky. Place your hand in mine, and let us swear an oath upon the heart that we, its guardians, will be true to each other and to our purpose until death chooses us." So it is sworn. Now, daughter, lead me to my rest, for I am overwhelmed, not with toil and suffering, but with too much joy. O Heart of Heaven, I thank thee." And lifting his hands above his head as though in adoration, Zibalbay turned, and, followed by the girl Maya, he tottered rather than walked into the chamber. When he was gone, the señor spoke to me. "This is very well, Ignacio," he said, "and most interesting, but just now, as I may remind you, there are things more pressing than the regeneration of the Indian race. For instance, our own safety. Tomorrow at the latest men will come to seek these villains who lie yonder, and if we are found here it seems likely that we shall be shot down as murderers. Say then, what do you propose to do?" "I propose, señor, that at the first light of dawn we should take the mules and ride away. The forest is dense, and it will be difficult to find us in it. Moreover, 2 days' journey will place us beyond the reach of the white men. Tell me, lady," I added to Maya, who had returned from the chamber, "do you know the road?" "I know the road," she answered, "but, sirs, before you take it, it is right that I should tell you something, seeing that not to do so would be to make an ill return for all the nobleness which you have shown towards my father and myself, saving us from death and shame. You have heard my father's words, and they are true, every one of them, but they are not all the truth. He rules that city of which he has spoken to you, but the nobles there are weary of his rule, which at times is somewhat harsh. Also, they deem him mad. It was for this reason that they suffered him to wander forth, seeking the fulfilment of a prophecy in which none of them have faith, for they were certain that he would perish in the wilderness and return no more to trouble them." "Then why did they follow you, who are his heiress, to accompany him, lady?" "Because I would have it so. I love my father, and if he was doomed to die because of his folly, it was my wish to die with him. Moreover, if you would know the truth, I hate that city where I was born, and the man in it to whom I am destined to be married, and desired to escape from it, if only for a while." "And does that man hate you, lady?" "No," she answered, turning her head aside, "but if he loves me, I believe that he loves power more. Had I stayed, although I am a woman, my father must have appointed me to rule in his place, and Tikal, my cousin, would have been next to throne, not on it. Therefore it was that he consented to my going, or the least I think so. Sirs, I learn now that you are to accompany us to the City of the Heart. Should we live to reach it, and for my part I rejoice at this, though I should be glad if our faces were set towards some other land. But I learn also that you have entered into a compact with my father, under which he is to give you the gold you need, and many great things are to happen, having for their end the setting up of the Indian people above the white man, and the raising of the City of the Heart to the place and power that she has lost, which, according to the prophecy, shall come about after the two halves of the broken symbol are set once more in the place that is prepared for them." "Do you not believe, then, in the prophecy?" asked the señor quickly. "I did not say so," she answered. "Certainly it is strange that by following a dream my father should have found that which he sought so eagerly, the trinket that your companion bears upon his breast. In it I will say this, that I have no great faith in priests and visions and gods, for of these it seems there have been many," and she glanced at the walls of the temple that were sculptured over with the demons which our forefathers worshipped, then added, "Indeed, if I understand aright, you, sirs, follow the path that is unknown to us." "We follow the truth, the true faith," I answered. "All the rest are false." "It may be so," she said, "but I know not how this saying will sound in the ears of the servants of the heart of heaven. Come if you will, but be warned. My people are a jealous people, and the name of a stranger is hateful to them. Few such have ever reached the city of the heart for many generations, and of those, save for one or two, none have escaped from it alive. They do not desire new things. They have little knowledge of the world beyond their walls, and seek for none. They wish to live as their forefathers lived, careless of a future which they will never see, and I think that it must go very ill with any who come among them bringing new faiths and doctrines, seeking to take power from their hands and to awaken them from their narrow sloth. Now, sirs, choose whether you will accompany us in our search towards the city of waters, or whether you will set your face to the sea again and forget that you chanced to hear a certain story from a wandering doctor whose misfortunes had made him mad, and an Indian girl who tended him. Now I listened to these words, which the Lady Maya spoke very earnestly and with power, and understood that they meant much. They meant that in going to the city of the heart we were, as she believed, going to our doom. Lady, I said, it may well chance that death waits me yonder, but I have looked too often in his eyes of late to shun them now. Death is everywhere, lady, and, did men stop to let him pass, little work would be done in the world. I have my task to do, or to attempt, and it seems that it lies yonder in the secret city, therefore thither I shall go, if my strength does not fail me, and fate will suffer it. Come what may, I travel with your father toward the city of the heart. For the señor here, it is different. Weeks ago I told him that no good would come to him from this journey, and what I said then I say now. He has heard your words, and if he will hearken to them and to mine, he will bid us farewell tomorrow and go his ways, leaving us to go ours." She listened, and, turning towards him, said, "You hear? What say you, white man?" And it seemed to me, who was watching her, that she awaited his answer anxiously. "Yes, lady, I hear," he replied with a laugh, "and doubtless it is all true enough, and I shall have my bones yonder among your countrymen. Well, so be it. I have determined to go, not in order to regenerate the race of Indians or any other race, but that I may see this city, and go I will. Since, other things apart, I am too idle to change my mind. Also, it seems to me that after this day's business there is more danger in staying here than in pushing forward." "I am glad that you are going, since you go of your own free will," she said, smiling. "May our fears be confounded, and your journey and ours prove prosperous. And now let us rest, for you must be very weary, as I am, and we should be stirring before the dawn." Next morning, at the first break of light, we started upon our journey, riding on 3 of the mules that we had captured, and leading the 4th laden with our goods and water skins. Very glad were all of us to see the last of the ruined temple, and yet it was sad to me to leave it, for there, hidden beneath some of the masses of the fallen masonry, lay all that was left of my friend and foster brother Molas, he whose bravery and wit had saved our lives at the cost of his own. Our plan was to avoid villages where we might be seen by men, and to keep ourselves hidden in the forest, for we feared lest we should be followed and brought to judgment because of the death of Don Pedro and his companions. This, as it chanced, we were able to do, since, having guns and ammunition in plenty, we shot birds and deer for our daily food. Travelling thus on muleback, soon our strength returned to us, even to the old man Zibalbay, who had suffered the most from fatigue and from ill treatment at the hands of the Mexicans. In something less than a week we had passed through the inhabited districts of Yucatan, and far out of reach of the white man, and now were journeying through the forest towards the great sierra that lies beyond it. To find a way in this thick and almost endless forest appeared impossible. Indeed, it would have been so but for the knowledge of Zibalbay and his daughter had gathered on their path seaward, and for the ancient map which they brought with them. On this map were traced the lines of the roads that in the days of the Indians' civilization pierced the country in every direction. One of these roads, the largest, ran from the mountain range which surrounds the lake of the City of the Heart, straight across the sierras and through the woodlands to the ruined town of Palenque, and thence to the coast. This road, or rather causeway, was in many places utterly overgrown by trees, and others sunk in swamps, or hidden by the dust and sand of the sierras. Sometimes for 2 or 3 days' journey there was nothing to show us that had ever existed. Still, by following the lines traced upon the map, and from time to time taking our position by the ruins of cities marked thereon, we never failed to find it again. The number of these old cities and temples was wonderful, and astonished the señor beyond measure, which is not strange, seeing that he was the first white man who had ever looked upon them. Often, as we rode, he would talk to me about them, and strive to paint in words a picture of this country, now but for desert plains or tangled bush, as it must have been 500 years or more before our day, when cities and villages, palaces and temples, crowded with tens of thousands of inhabitants, were to be seen everywhere, and the fertile face of the earth was hidden in the green of crops. What histories lay buried in these jungles, and what scenes must have been enacted on the crumbling pyramids which confronted us day by day before the sword of the conqueror, or the breath of pestilence, or both, made the land desolate. Then it would have been a sight worth seeing, and our hearts beat at the thought that if things went well with us, it might be our fortune to witness that sight, that our eyes might behold the greatest of these cities, sought for many generations, but as yet unfound, the very navel of this ancient and mysterious civilization, dying indeed, but still existent. I had other hopes to draw me onward, but, as I believe, it was this desire that sustained the señor and many a difficulty and danger of our march. It was with him, while he was hacking a mule path through the scrub with his machete, when we toiled along hour after hour beneath the burning sun, and even at night, as he lay overtired and sleepless, tormented by insects and aching with fever. Filled with this thought, he was never weary of questioning the silent Zibalbay as to the history, or rather the legend, of the land through which we journeyed, or of listening to the Lady Maya's description of the City of the Heart, till even she grew tired and begged him to speak instead of the country across the water where he was born, of its ceaseless life and the wonders of its civilization. Strange as it may seem, I, who watched them both from day to day, know it to be true that she was in mind the more modern of the two. So much so, indeed, that in listening to their talk I might have fancied that Maya was the child of the new world, filled with the spirit of to day, and he the heir of the proud and secret race dying beneath its weight of years. "I cannot understand you," she would say to him. "Why do you so love histories and ruins and stories of people that have long been dead? I hate them. Once they lived and doubtless were well enough in their place and time, but now they are past and done with, and it is we who live. And she stretched out her arms as though she would clasp the sunshine to her breast. "I tell you," she went on, "that this home of mine, of which you are so fond of talking, is nothing but a great burying place, and those who dwell in it are like ghosts who wander to and fro, thinking of the things that they did or did not do 1,000 years before. It was their ancestors who did things, not they, for they do nothing except plot against each other, eat, sleep, drink, and mumble prayers to a God in whom they do not believe. Did my father but not know it, he wastes time and trouble in making plans for the redemption of the people of the heart, who think him mad for his pains. They cannot be redeemed. Were it otherwise, do you suppose that they would have been content to sit still all these hundreds of years, knowing nothing of the great world outside of them, and day by day watching their numbers dwindle, till life but flickers in the race as in a dying lamp? So it is also, if a less degree, with those Indians whom Don Ignatio here seeks to lift out of the mire into which the Spaniards trod them. Sirs, I believe that our blood has had its day. There is no more growth in us. We are corn ripe for the sickle of death. That is, most of us are. Therefore, if I could have my will, while I am still young, I would turn my back upon this city which you so desire to see, taking with me the wealth that is useless there, but which, it seems, would bring me many good things in other lands, and live out my time among people who have a present and future as well as a past." Then the señor would laugh and argue that the past is more than the present, and that it is better to be dead than alive, and many other such follies, and I would grow angry and reprove Maya for her words, which shocked me, whereat she would yawn and talk of something else, for I and my discourses wearied her. Only Zibalbay took no heed, for his mind was set upon other things, even if he heard us, which I doubt. But all this while, notwithstanding her light talk, her careless manner, the Lady Maya was learning, yes, even from me, when the señor was not at hand, for she would inquire into everything and forget nothing that she heard. The history of the countries of the world, their modes of government and religions, the manners, customs, and appearance of their inhabitants. He told her of them from day to day, nor did she weary of listening, till at length the señor met with an adventure that went near to separating him from her for ever, and showed me, although I had no great love for her or any of her sex, that whatever might be her faults, this woman's heart was true and bold. End of chapter 11. H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 12. Maya descends the Cueva. One evening, it was after we had left the forest country, and with much toil climbed the sierra till we reached the desert beyond, a desert that seemed to be boundless, We set our camp amongst the clump of great aloes that grew at the foot of the stony hill. This hill was marked on Zibalbay's map as being the site of an underground reservoir known as a cueva, whence in the old days, when this place was inhabited, the Indians drew their supply of water in the dry season from deep down in the bowels of the earth. That this particular cueva existed was proved by the fact that the ancient road, which here was plainly visible, ran through the ruins of a large town, whereof the population must once have been supplied by it. But when Zibalbay and his daughter slept at the spot on their downward journey, they were spared the necessity of looking for it by the discovery of a rain pool in the hollow of a rock. Now, however, no rain having fallen for weeks, after we had eaten and drunk such water as remained in our water skins, we determined to seek for the cueva in order to refill the skins and give drink to the thirsty animals. Accordingly, we began to examine the rocky hill, and presently found a stone archway, now nearly filled up with soil and half hidden by thorn bushes, which from its appearance and position we judged to be the entrance to the cueva. Having provided ourselves with an armful of torches made from the dead stems of a variety of aloe that grew around in plenty, we lit 4 of them, and I led the way through the hole to find myself in a cave where a great and mysterious wind blew and sighed in sudden gusts that almost extinguished our lights. Following this cave, we came to a pit or shaft at the end of it, which evidently led to the springs of water. This shaft of unknown depth was almost, if not quite, as smooth and perpendicular as though it had been hollowed by the hand of man. But the strangest thing about it was the terrible stairway that the ancients had used to approach the water, consisting, as it did, of a double row of notches, 8 or 10 inches deep, cut in the face of the shaft. Up and down these notches the water carriers must have passed for generations, for they were much worn, and a groove made by the feet of the men ran to the top of this awful ladder. The señor, finding a fragment of rock, let it fall over the edge of the pit, and several seconds passed before a faint sound told us that it had touched the bottom. "What a dreadful place!" he said. "I think that I had rather die of thirst than attempt its descent." "Still, people have done so in the past," answered Maya, "for look, this is where they stepped off the edge." "Perhaps they had a rope to hold by, lady," I suggested. "When I was a young man I have descended mines almost as steep, with no other ladder than one made of tree trunks, monkey poles they are called, notched after this fashion, and set from side to side of the shaft. Now it would be my death to try, for such heights make me dizzy." "Come away," said Zibalbay. "None of us here could take that road and live. The mules must go thirsty. 5 hours' journey away there is a pool where they can drink tomorrow." Then we turned and left this cave of the winds. We were glad to be outside of it, for the place had an unholy look, and all the drought notwithstanding was hot to suffocation. Zibalbay walked to the camp, but we stayed to pluck some forage for the mules. Soon the others grew weary of this task and fell to talking as they watched the sunset, which was very beautiful on these lonely plains. Presently I heard the Lady Maya say: "Pick me that flower, friend, to wear upon my breast," and she pointed to a snow-white cactus bloom that grew amongst some rocks. The señor climbed to the place and stretched out his hand to cut the flower, when of a sudden I heard him utter an exclamation and saw him start. "What is it?" I said. "Have you pricked yourself or cut your hand?" He made no answer, but his eyes grew wide with horror, and he pointed at something grey that was gliding away among the stones. As he pointed, I saw a spot of blood appear upon his wrist. Maya saw it also. "A snake has bitten you," she cried in a voice of agony. Then, springing to him before I guessed what she was about to do, she seized his arm with both hands and set her lips to the wound. He tried to wrench it free, but she clung to him fiercely, calling to me to bring a stick, and she tore a strip off her robe and made it fast round his wrist above the puncture. By now I was there with the stick, and setting it in a loop of linen, I twisted it till the hand turned blue from the pressure. "What snake was it?" I asked. "The deadly grey sort," he answered, adding, "Don't look so frightened, Maya. I know the cure. Come to the camp, quick." In 2 minutes we reached it, and the señor had snatched a sharp knife and a powder flask. "Now, friend," he said, handing me the knife, "cut deep, since it is life or death for me, and there are no arteries in the top of the wrist." Seeing what had come about, Zibalbay held the señor's hand, and I cut twice. He never winced, but at each slash Maya groaned. Then, having let blood fall till it would run no more, we poured powder into the wound, as much as will lie on a 20-cent piece, and fired it. It went off like a puff of white smoke, leaving the flesh beneath it black and charred. "Now, as we have no brandy, there is nothing more to be done except to wait," said the señor, with an attempt at a smile. Zibalbay, going to a bag, produced from it some /cauca/ paste. "Eat this," he said; "it is better than any fire water." The señor took the stuff and began to swallow it, till presently I saw that he could force no more down. A paralysis seemed to be creeping over him. His throat contracted, and his eyelids fell as though weighted upon by irresistible sleep. Now, notwithstanding our remedies, seeing that the poison had got hold of him, we seized him by the arms and began to walk him to and fro, encouraging him at the same time to keep a brave heart and fight against death. "I am doing my best," he answered feebly. Then his mind began to wander, and at length he fell down and his eyes shut. A great fear and horror seized me, for I thought that he was about to die, and with them a kind of rage because I was impotent to save him. Already, to tell the truth, I was jealous of the Lady Maya, and now my jealousy broke out in bitter and unjust words. "This is your fault," I said. "You are cruel," she answered, "and you speak thus because you hate me." "Perhaps I am cruel, lady. Would not you be cruel if you saw the friend you love perishing through a woman's folly?" "Are you the only one that can love?" she whispered. "Unless we can rouse him, the white man will die," said Zibalbay. "Oh, awake!" cried Maya, despairing, placing her lips close to the señor's ear. "They say that I have killed you. Awake, awake!" He seemed to hear her. Though his eyes did not open, he smiled faintly and murmured, "I will try." Then, with our help, he struggled from the ground and began to walk once more, but like a man who is drunk. Thrice he staggered backwards and forwards along the path our feet had worn. Presently he fell again, and putting our hands upon his breast, we could feel the contractions of his heart growing weaker every moment, till at last they seemed to die away. But of a sudden, when we had already abandoned hope, it pulsed violently, and from every pore of his skin, which till now had been parched and dry, there burst so profuse a perspiration that in the light of the rising moon we could see it running down his face. "I think that the white man will live now. He has conquered the poison," said Zibalbay quietly, and hearing his words I returned thanks to God in my heart. Then we laid him in a hammock, piling blankets and sarapes over him, till at length the perspiration ceased, all the fluid in his body having evaporated, taking the venom with it. For an hour or more he slept, then awoke and asked for water in a faint voice. We who were watching looked at each other in dismay, for we had not a single drop to give, and this we were obliged to tell him. He groaned and was silent for a while, then said, "It would have been kinder to let me die of the poison, for this torment of thirst is more than I can bear." "Can we try the cuevas?" faltered Maya. "It is impossible," answered her father. "We should all be killed." "Yes, yes," replied the señor, "it is impossible. Better that one should die than four." "Father," said Maya, "you must take the best mule and ride forward to the pool where we should camp to morrow. The moon shines, and with good fortune you may be back in 8 or 9 hours." "It is useless," murmured the señor. "I can never live so long without drink. My throat is like a hot coal." Zibalbay shrugged his shoulders. He also thought that it was useless, but his daughter turned upon him fiercely and said, "Are you going, or shall I ride myself?" Then he went, muttering in his beard, and in a few minutes we heard the footsteps of the mule as it shambled forward into the desert. "Fear not," I said to the señor, "it is the poison that has dried you up, but thirst will not kill you so soon, and presently you will feel it less. Oh, that we had medicine here to make you sleep." He lay quiet for a space, giving no answer, but from the workings of his hands and face we could see that he suffered much. "Maya," he said at length, "can you find me a cool stone to put in my mouth?" She searched and found a pebble, which he sucked, but after a time it fell from his lips, and we saw that it was as dry as when it had entered them. Then of a sudden his brain gave way, and he began to rave huskily in many languages. "Are you devils," he asked, "that you suffer me to die in torment for this want of a drink of water? Why do you stand there and mock me? Oh, have pity and give me water." For a while we bore it, though perhaps our agonies were greater than his own. Then Maya rose and looked at his face. It was sunken as with a heavy illness. Thick black rings had appeared beneath his blue eyes, and his lips were flecked with blood. "I can endure this no more," she said in a dry voice. "Watch your friend, Don Ignatio." "You are right," I answered. "This is no place for a woman. Go and sleep yonder, so that I can wake you if there is need." She looked at me reproachfully, but went without answering, and sat down behind a bush about 30 yards away. Here, it seems, for all this story she told me afterwards, and for the most part I do but repeat her words. She began to think. She was sure that without water the señor could not live through the night, and it was impossible that her father should return before dawn at the earliest. He was dying, and she felt as though her life were ebbing with his own, for now she knew that she loved him. Unless something could be done, he must soon be dead, and her heart would be broken. Only one thing could save him and her: water. In the depths of yonder hill, within a few paces of her, doubtless it lay in plenty, but who would venture to seek it there? Yet the descent of the /cueva must be possible, since the ancient used it daily, and why could she not do what they had done? She was young and active, and from childhood it had been a delight to her to climb in dangerous places above the walls and pyramids of the City of the Heart, nor had her head failed her, however lofty they might chance to be. Why, then, should it fail her now, when the life of the man she loved was at stake? Also, What would it matter if it did fail her, seeing that if he died, she wished to die also? Yes, she would try. When once she had made up her mind, Maya set about the task swiftly. I was standing by the hammock praying to heaven to spare the life of my friend, who lay there beating his hands to and fro and moaning in misery, when I saw her creep up and look at him. "You think you love him," she said to me suddenly, "but I tell you that you do not know what love is. If I live, I, whom you despise, will teach you, Don Ignatio." I took no heed of her words, for I thought them foolish. Then, unseen by me, Maya glided away to where the mules were picketed, and provided herself with flint, steel, tinder, a rope, and a small water skin of untanned hide, which she strapped upon her shoulders. In another minute she was running across the desert like a deer. At the entrance to the /cueva she paused to gather up the aloe torches which had been thrown down there, and also to look for one moment at the familiar face of the night she might never see again. Then she lit a torch and crept through the narrow opening. The place had been awful in the evening when she visited it in the company of the rest of us. Now alone, and at night, it appalled her. Great winds roared round its vast recesses, sucked thither from the hollows of the earth, and in them could be heard the sounds like those of human voices sobbing and making moan. Maya shivered, for she thought that these were the ghosts of dead Antiguos, bewailing their eternal grief in this unearthly place. Still she passed forward boldly, notwithstanding her fears, till she stood on the brink of the pit. Here she halted to strip herself so that there might be as little as possible to impede her movements in climbing the stair, and twisted her hair into a knot. Next she tied the cord about her middle, and the water skin to which she fastened the flint and steel upon her shoulders. Lighting two of the largest torches, she fixed them slanting wise in crevices of the rock, so that their flame shone over the mouth of the shaft, down which she threw first a bundle of unlit torches, and lastly one on fire. This torch did not go out as she half expected that it would, for presently, looking down the pit, she saw a spark of light shining 150 feet or more beneath her. Now all her preparations were complete, and nothing remained to be done except to descend and search for the water. For a moment Maya hesitated, looking at the spark of fire that gleamed so far below, and at the narrow niches cut in the smooth surface of the rock. Then, feeling that if she stood longer thus her terrors would master her, she knelt down, and holding to the rock with her hands, she thrust her leg over the edge of the pit, feeling at its side with her feet till she found the first niche. Resting her weight on this foot, she dropped the other till she reached the second niche, which was about 18 inches lower and 10 inches to the left of the first, for these niches were cut in a zigzag fashion, number 1 being cut above number 3, number 2 above number 4, and so on. Now she must face one of the most terrible risks of the descent, for it was impossible for her to reach number 3 niche without leaving go of the edge of the pit, nor could she get hold of number 1 with her hand until the foot was in number 4, so that there was no alternative except to balance herself on one leg, and placing her palms against the smooth rock, slide them down till her foot rested on number 4 and her fingers in number 1. Clinging thus like a fly to the rock, she stepped into number 3, and, not daring to pause, began at once to feel for number 4. In her anxiety she dropped her leg too low, and while drawing it back almost overbalanced herself. A thrill of horrible fear struck her, causing her spine to creep, but resting her face against the rock, by the desperate effort she retained her presence of mind, and in another second was standing in number 4 and holding to number 1. Thenceforward the descent was easier, since all she had to do was to shift the grip of her hands from hole to hole, and remember in which line she must search with her foot for the succeeding niche. So far from hindering her, the darkness proved a boon, since it prevented her from beholding the horror of the place. By the time that she was a third of the way down the shaft, her courage returned to her, and the only fear she felt was lest one of the niches should be broken. Fortunately, this was not the case, although one of them was so much worn that her toes slipped out of it, and for a second or two she hung by her hands. Recovering herself, she went on from step to step, till at length she stood at the bottom of the shaft. After a minute's pause to get her breath, Maya found one of the dry aloe stems and lit it at the embers of the torch which she had thrown down the pit. Then she looked round her to find herself in a large natural cavern of no great height, which sloped gently downward further than she could see. Turning her eyes to the floor, she searched for and discovered the path that had been hollowed out by the feet of the ancients, but now was half hidden in sand and dust. It ran straight down the cave, and she followed it for 50 paces or more, holding the light in one hand and some spare torches under her arm. Here in this cave the atmosphere was so hot and still that she was scarcely able to breathe, though even at a distance she could hear a strange eddying of wind roaring in the shaft down which she had come. Presently the cavern began to decrease in size, till it narrowed into a small passage. Maya sighed aloud, fearing lest she should be coming to the mouth of a second shaft, for she had heard me say that the water in these cuevas was something else, for depth of 500 or 600 feet, whereas she had not descended more than 200. When she had walked another 10 or 15 paces, however, the passage took a sudden turn, and her doubts were set to rest. There, in the centre of a wonderful place such as she had never seen before, gleamed the water which she had risked her life to reach. How large the place where she found herself might be, Maya never knew, since the feeble light of her torch did not pierce far into the gloom. All that she could see was a number of white columns, without doubt stalactites, though she imagined them to have been fashioned by man, rising from the floor of the cavern to its roof, and in the midst of them a circular pit 30 feet or more across, in which lay the water. This water, though clear as crystal, was not still, for once in every few seconds a great bubble, 3 or 4 feet in diameter, rose in the centre of the pool and burst on its surface, and sent a ring of ripples to the rocky sides. So beautiful was this bubble, and so regular in its appearance, that for some minutes Maya watched it. Then, remembering that she had no time to spare, she set herself to get the water, only to learn that she was confronted with a new difficulty, and one which, but for her foresight, might have proved insuperable. The rock bank of the pool was so smooth and sloped so steeply to the water that it was quite impossible for anyone to keep a footing on it. The ancients had overcome the trouble by means of a wooden staircase, as was evident by the places hollowed in the rock to receive the uprights, but that structure had long since rotted away. At the head where the staircase had stood, a hole was bored in the rock, doubtless to receive a rope by which the water bearers supported themselves while they filled their jars, and the sight of this hole gave Maya a thought. Untying the cord which she had brought with her, she made it fast through the hole, and having fixed this torch into one of the spaces hollowed to hold the timbers of the stairway, she slid down the bank till she stood abreast high in the water. For a minute or more she remained thus, drinking her fill and enjoying the coolness of her bath, which was pleasant after the stupefying heat of the caves. Then, first having taken care to remove the tinder that was tied to it, she slipped the water skin from her shoulder, washed it out, filled it, and replaced it. Next she dragged herself up the bank, and by the light of a new torch started for the foot of the shaft. Here Maya rested a while, gathering up her energies, until, feeling that once more she began to grow afraid, she commenced the ascent. There were 101 of the notches, for she had counted them as she came down. Now again she began to count, so that she might know her exact position in the shaft, of which she could see nothing because of the intense darkness. Before she had ascended 50 steps, she was dismayed to find a feeling of weariness taking possession of her, which forced her to pause a while, hanging at the face of the pit. Then she went on again, and with great efforts reached the 75th step, which upon more she was obliged to hang, gaining breath, till a pain in her right leg, upon which most of her weight rested, warned her that she must stay no longer. For the third time she struggled upwards desperately and despairingly, dragging her feet from niche to niche. Her breath came in gasps. The straps of the heavy water skin cut into her tender flesh, and her brain began to reel. Now there were but 10 more steps. It came into her mind that she might save herself by losing the burden of the water from her shoulders, to fall to the bottom of the pit, but this she would not do. Now only 3 niches remained, and the goal would be won. But now also her brain was giving. Darker and more bewildered it grew, yet by a desperate effort she kept some fragments of her sense. Her foot was in the topmost hole, her body was balanced upon the edge of the pit, and pulled down by the choking weight of the water. She was like to fall backwards. Then it seemed that a voice called her, and for the last time she struggled, writhing forward as does a wounded snake, till darkness closed in upon her mind. When Maya recovered a while later, she found that she was lying on the edge of the shaft, over which her feet still hung. Instantly she remembered all, and, with a little scream of terror, drew herself along the floor. With difficulty, for she was still breathless, and her muscles seemed to have no strength, she rose to her feet, and having felt for and picked up her linen robe, she crept toward the spot of light which marked the entrance to the cave. Presently she was through it, and, uttering a sigh of thankfulness, sank to the earth and put on her garment. Then, rising, she walked slowly towards the camp, bearing the precious water with her. Meanwhile, knowing nothing of all this, I, Ignatio, also had been thinking. I remembered how, when I lay crushed beneath a rock, the señor had ventured his life to save me. Should I not then venture mine to save his? It seemed so. Without water he would certainly die, and greatly as I dreaded to attempt the descent of the /cueva, yet it must be done. Leaving the hammock, I searched for the Lady Maya, but could not find her, so I called aloud, "Señora Maya, señora, where are you, señora?" "Here," she answered. "What is it? Is he dead?" "No," I said, "but I am sure that unless he has water he will die within little more than an hour. Therefore I have made up my mind to try to descend the cueva. Will you be so good as to watch the señor till I return, and if I return no more, as is probable, to tell your father what has happened? He will find the talisman of the broken heart lying with my clothes at the mouth of the pit. I pray that he will take it, and I pray also that he should travel back to Mexico, bearing with him some of the wealth of his city, there to continue the great work that I have begun, of which I have spoken to him. Farewell, señora." "Stop, Don Ignacio," said Maya in a hoarse voice. "There is no need for you to descend the cueva." "Why not, lady? I should be glad to escape the task, but this is a question of life or death." "Yes," she answered, "and because it is a question of life or death, Don Ignacio, I have already climbed that hideous place, and here is the water." So saying, she fell forward and swooned upon the ground. I answered nothing. I was too much amazed, and indeed too much ashamed, to speak. Lifting Maya's senseless form, I placed her in a hammock that was slung close by. Next I took the water skin and a leather cup, and ran with it to my friend's side. By now the señor was lost in a coma, and lay still, only moaning from time to time. Undoing the mouth of the skin, I poured out a cupful of water, with which I began to sprinkle his brow and to moisten his cracked lips. At the touch and smell of the fluid a change came over the face of the dying man. The empty look left it, and the eyes opened. "That was water," he muttered. "I can taste it." Now he saw the cup, and the sight seemed to give him a sudden strength. He stretched out his arms, and snatching it from my hand, he drained it in 3 gulps. "More," he gasped, "more." But as yet I would give him no more, though he prayed piteously for it, and when I did allow him to drink again, it was in sips only. For an hour he sipped thus, till at length even his thirst was partially satisfied, and the shrunken cheeks began to fill out, and the dull eyes to brighten. "The water has saved my life," he whispered. "Where did it come from?" "I will tell you to morrow," I answered. "Sleep now, if you can." End of chapter 12.